You've entered Dark Story Chronicles, where real nightmares breathe. If you're hearing this, it's already too late to turn back. Subscribe now, before the next story finds you. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what I saw in those woods. What hunted us through the endless pines of the Boundary Waters region, where Minnesota bleeds into Ontario. I'm writing this account because someone needs to know the truth about what's out there, waiting in the spaces between the trees where the light doesn't reach. I transferred to the Superior National Forest Ranger Station in late September 3 years ago. After 8 years working the relatively tame parks of Colorado, I thought I'd seen everything. Drunk campers, lost hikers, the occasional aggressive wildlife. I was wrong. I was so goddamn wrong. My supervisor, Carter Mitchell, picked me up from the small regional airport in his battered Ford Ranger. He was 50-some, with the kind of weathered face that comes from decades of outdoor work. His handshake was firm, but his eyes held something I couldn't quite place. Weariness, maybe, or exhaustion. "Welcome to the end of the world," he said as we drove north on increasingly narrow roads. Population? Not enough. The station was a small complex of buildings 30 miles from the nearest town. A gas station, a diner, and maybe 200 people if you counted generously. A ranger station housed 6 full-time rangers, a rotating cast of seasonal workers, and enough isolation to make you forget the modern world existed. Carter introduced me to the others over coffee that evening. There was Ezra, a quiet man in his 40s who'd worked these woods for 15 years. He nodded at me once and said nothing, his eyes constantly drifting into the darkening windows. Gabriel and Isaac were younger, both in their late 20s, and they had the kind of easy camaraderie that comes from surviving hard situations together. "You'll meet the rest of the crew tomorrow," Carter said. "Jaden and Luca are out on patrol. They'll be back by midnight." "Patrol?" I asked. "In the dark?" The room went quiet. Gabriel and Isaac exchanged a look. "We run night patrols here," Carter said carefully. "Different kind of problems after sunset. Poachers, something like that." Ezra spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel. "You'll find out soon enough." That night, I lay in my bunk in the Ranger housing building, listening to the forest. I'd spent years in the wilderness, but these woods sounded different. The usual night chorus of insects and small animals was there, but underneath it, I heard something else. A kind of silence that felt pregnant with waiting. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps on the porch, heavy and deliberate. Then voices, Jaden and Luca returning from patrol. Through my thin walls, I heard Carter talking to them in the common room. "Anything tracks near Sector 7, a voice replied. Jaden I'd learn later. "Big ones, fresh." "How fresh?" "Within the last 2 hours." And Carter, "There were drag marks leading deeper in." A long pause. "Did you follow them?" "Hell no, not at night. You know the rules." I lay there in the darkness, wondering what kind of tracks had grown men too scared to follow. I told myself it was probably bear tracks. Black bears were common in Minnesota. Maybe a moose kill. I didn't believe it even then. The next morning, I met Jaden and Luca properly. Jaden was built like a linebacker, with close cropped hair and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. Luca was smaller, wiry, with nervous energy that kept him constantly moving. Both men looked like they hadn't slept well. "New blood," Jaden said, looking me over. "How much did they tell you about?" "What?" "That's what I thought." He turned to Carter. "When soon," Carter said. "Let him settle in first." But I wouldn't get the chance to settle in. That afternoon, a call came over the radio. A group of hikers, 4 college kids from Madison, had failed to check in at their planned campsite. They were 2 days overdue, and their families were frantic. Carter's jaw tightened. Where was their last known position? The dispatcher's voice crackled through static. Sector 7, near the old logging road, the same area where Jaden and Luca had found the tracks. "We'll find them," Carter said, but his voice carried no conviction. Within an hour, 6 of us were geared up and heading into the forest. Carter led with Ezra beside him. Gabriel and Isaac were next, and Jaden brought the rear with me. We each carried the standard gear, GPS, first aid, emergency supplies, but I noticed everyone also carried something extra. Gabriel had a large hunting knife strapped to his belt. Isaac carried a baseball bat. Jaden had a pistol on his hip, which struck me as odd. Rangers typically didn't carry handguns on search and rescue. "Just in case," he said when he caught me looking. "You'll want to stay close to me." The forest was beautiful in that early autumn way, leaves turning golden red, the air crisp and clean. But as we moved deeper, following the trail the hikers had supposedly taken, that beauty took on a sinister quality. The trees grew denser, their branches interlocking overhead to block out the sun. The underbrush pressed in close, and it was quiet. Too quiet. "Birds should be everywhere this time of year," I said to Jaden. He just nodded, his hand resting on his pistol. "They know better." We found the first sign of the hikers around 3 p.m. A campsite that had been hastily abandoned. Tents still up, sleeping bags unrolled. A backpack torn open with clothes scattered everywhere. There was a cookpot overturned near a dead fire, and something that might have been oatmeal dried in a congealed mass on the ground. But no people, no blood, just absence. Carter crouched near the fire pit, examining something in the ashes. His face had gone pale. "What is it?" I asked. He held up what looked like a small bone, too small to be human. Some kind of animal, but it had been deliberately placed in the fire pit, arranged with others in a pattern I didn't recognize. "They were being watched," Ezra said quietly. "Before it happened? Before what happened?" I demanded. "Someone needs to tell me what the hell is going on." Carter stood, pocketing the bones. "Not here. We need to find these kids first." We spread out, searching the area in pairs. I went with Gabriel, moving in widening circles from the campsite. The forest pressed in around us, and I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, feeling eyes on my back. "There," Gabriel said suddenly, pointing scratches on a tree trunk about 7 feet up. Deep gouges in the bark, parallel marks that suggested claws, but they were too high for any black bear I had ever seen. And 2 deliberate 3 scratches, then a gap, then 3 more, almost like something marking territory. "We should head back," Gabriel said, his voice tight. But then we heard it, a sound that made my blood freeze in my veins. It started as a low moan, almost human, echoing through the trees from somewhere ahead. Then it rose in pitch, becoming a howl that contained too much intelligence, too much hunger.
It went on for maybe 10 seconds, though it felt like an eternity. When it finally stopped, the silence that followed was absolute. "Move," Gabriel hissed, grabbing my arm. "Now." We ran back to the others, crashing through the underbrush. I could hear that howl echoing in my memory, and something about it felt fundamentally wrong, like a violation of natural law. The group had reconvened at the campsite. Everyone looked spooked. "You heard it," Carter said. It wasn't a question. "What the was that?" I demanded. Carter looked at the sky, gauging the light. "Maybe 2 hours until sunset? We're heading back now." "What about the hikers?" "They're gone," Ezra said flatly. "They were gone the moment they made camp here. We can't just... We're going now." Carter's voice left no room for argument. "We'll come back tomorrow with more people in the daylight."
As we hiked back, moving faster than protocol recommended, I noticed Jaden had his pistol drawn. He kept looking back over his shoulder, scanning the darkening forest. "What's hunting us?" I asked him quietly. He was quiet for a long moment. Then the question isn't what, it's which one. We made it back to the station just as true darkness fell. Once inside, with the doors locked and lights blazing, Carter finally sat us all down in the common room.
"You need to understand something," he said, looking directly at me. "This isn't a normal posting. We're not just rangers here. We're containment." "Containment of what?" He pulled out a worn file folder, the kind that predated digital records. Inside were photographs, old Polaroids, faded newspaper clippings, and what looked like incident reports dating back decades. People have been disappearing in these woods since before there were rangers, Carter said. The Native Americans who lived here, the Ojibwe, they had stories, warnings. They knew not to go deep into certain areas, especially at night. When the loggers came in the 1800s, they lost men. Whole camps sometimes. The logging companies covered it up, called it accidents or desertion. He spread the photos across the table. Blurred shapes in forest shadows, massive footprints in mud, and one image that made my stomach turn. A deer carcass in a tree, 15 feet up, twisted into an impossible position. 3 things hunt these woods, Ezra said, speaking up. 3 things that shouldn't exist, but do. We've seen them, lost people to them. Bigfoot, Gabriel said, ticking off on his fingers, though that's not what the Ojibwe called it. They called it different names depending on the region. Janosqua, Rugaru, a giant ape-like creature, territorial, usually avoids humans, but not always. The Dogman, Isaac continued, 7 to 8 feet tall, walks on 2 legs, but has the head of a wolf or dog, aggressive as hell. The natives called it Shankawatakin. Carries off dogs, but it'll take people too if it catches them alone. Carter tapped one of the photographs. And the Wendigo, the worst of the 3. The Ojibwe won't even speak its name without protection prayers. A creature of eternal hunger. It was human once, the legends say. Someone who resorted to cannibalism during a hard winter and became cursed. Now it's something else. Something that can never be full, never be satisfied. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was too absurd. You're telling me cryptids are real? That monsters are killing people in a national forest and nobody knows about it? People know, Carter said quietly. Just not the public. There are offices in the Park Service that handle this. Special units. We file reports,
They classify them, and the disappearances get written off as accidents or people getting lost. Because what's the alternative? Tell the truth and cause mass panic? Shut down the entire forest? This is insane. Is it? Jaden leaned forward. How many people disappear in national forests every year? Thousands? How many are never found? Hundreds? How many show signs of something that doesn't match any known predator? How many are found in impossible locations or states? I thought about the case I'd read about in Colorado, the missing kid whose shoe was found on a mountain ridge miles from where he vanished, with no tracks leading to or from it. The hiker in Wyoming, found with injuries that suggested a fall from a great height, even though he'd been in flat terrain. The search and rescue teams, who reported finding camps that looked like they'd been hit by a tornado despite calm weather. The hikers, I said. The ones we were looking for. Carter nodded slowly. The howl you heard? That was probably the Wendigo. It hunts by imitating sounds. Animals, people, whatever it takes to draw prey closer. Based on the claw marks Gabriel found, the dogman might be in the area too. If both of them are hunting the same territory, he trailed off. We have to try to save them. There's nothing to save, Ezra said, and his voice carried the weight of experience. If the Wendigo has them, they're already dead. Best case scenario, it was quick. Worst case, he shook his head. You don't want to know the worst case. I spent that night reading the file Carter had given me. Reports dating back 50 years, all following the same patterns. Disappearances clustered in certain areas, evidence of massive creatures, footprints 18 inches long, claw marks on trees, impossible kills, witness statements from survivors, most of whom refused to go back into the woods. A few photographs, always blurry, always inconclusive. And the names. God, the names. Pages and pages of missing people. Each one marked with a code. BF1 through BF47. DM1 through DM23. W1 through W38. That's when I realized we weren't the first team stationed here, and we probably wouldn't be the last. Tomorrow, Carter said we'd go back at dawn with the whole team in full daylight, following protocol. We'd search for the hikers, even though we knew what we'd find. As I lay in my bunk that night, I heard that howl again, distant but unmistakable, and I understood with absolute certainty that my old life was over. I was part of something now, something that would mark me forever. I just didn't know how right I was. We went back at dawn, 8 of us this time. Carter had called in Anthony and Dylan from the northern station, 2 veterans who'd worked these woods even longer than Ezra. They arrived at 5 a.m., grim-faced and heavily armed. Both carried rifles in addition to their standard gear. Sector 7? Anthony asked, and Carter just nodded. The hiking felt different in daylight. The forest was still too quiet, but the sunlight filtering through the canopy made it seem almost normal. Almost. I stayed close to the center of the group, watching how the experienced rangers moved. They never bunched up, always maintained sight lines to each other, and constantly scanned the forest, not just at ground level, but up in the trees. They climbed, Dylan explained when he caught me watching. All 3 of them. Never assume something isn't above you. We reached the abandoned campsite by 8 a.m. In daylight, it looked even more disturbing. The hikers had left everything, their phones, wallets, even car keys. 4 phones were scattered around the site, all dead. One had a cracked screen, as if it had been dropped or thrown. Jaden picked up one of the phones and plugged it into a portable charger he carried. After a few minutes, it flickered to life. He scrolled through it, his expression darkening. Videos, he said, turning the screen so Carter could see. The footage was shaky and dark, filmed by flashlight. I could hear young voices, scared, but trying to laugh it off. Did you hear that?
Out there in the trees? Probably just a deer, a male voice responded, but he sounded uncertain. The camera panned across the campsite, catching glimpses of 3 other people huddled near the fire. Then it swung toward the tree line. For just a moment, 2 points of light reflected back. Eyes too high off the ground to be a deer or even a bear. Then they blinked out. "Oh, shit," someone whispered off camera. The next video was time-stamped 3 hours later. The footage was chaotic, spinning wildly as the person ran. In the background, I could hear screaming, and that howl, the same one I heard yesterday, but closer, so much closer. The camera caught a glimpse of something between the trees, tall, impossibly tall and thin, moving with a strange jerking gait. The footage went black. That was taken at 2:47 a.m., 6 hours ago. We spread out in a search pattern, moving slowly and methodically. I was paired with Isaac this time, both of us carrying long hiking poles to probe the underbrush. The protocol was clear. If we found evidence, we documented it. If we found remains, we called everyone in. If we encountered one of the creatures, we ran. "How do you tell them apart?" I asked Isaac quietly as we searched. The 3 things. Bigfoot or the Genosqua. "You smell before you see," Isaac said, "like a wet dog mixed with rotten eggs. They're massive, 8 to 10 feet tall, covered in dark hair, usually brown or black. They'll throw rocks at you first, trying to scare you off. If that doesn't work..." He shrugged. "Most people don't survive the 'if that doesn't work' part." We moved through a particularly dense section of forest, pushing aside pine branches. Isaac continued. "The dog man is different, more aggressive, more predatory. Looks like someone tried to make a werewolf, but got it wrong. Wolf head on a human-like body, but all wrong. The proportions are off. When it moves, it's all wrong, too. You see it, and your brain just screams that this thing shouldn't exist. And the Wendigo." Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "The Wendigo is the worst. The old-timers say it's not just a creature. It's a curse, a spirit of hunger. It was human once, which makes it worse somehow. Emaciated, skeletal, but strong as hell. Antlers growing out of its skull, skin gray like a corpse, and the smell, God, the smell, like death and decay, and something else, something that makes you want to vomit. But the worst part is that it's smart. It hunts like a human would hunt, sets traps, uses strategy, and it can mimic voices perfectly." A branch snaps somewhere behind us. We both froze. "Hello?" a voice called out. Female, young, scared. Is someone there? Please help me." My instinct was to respond, to run toward the voice. But Isaac grabbed my arm with bruising force, his eyes wide with fear. He put a finger to his lips, shaking his head frantically. "Please," the voice called again, closer now. "I'm hurt. I can't walk. Please help me." The voice was moving through the forest toward us, but I couldn't see anyone, just trees and shadows. The voice sounded so genuine, so desperate. "My friends are dead," the voice sobbed. "Something killed them. Please, I don't want to die alone. Please." Isaac keyed his radio, keeping his voice barely above a whisper. "Carter, we have contact. Sector 7, grid reference." He rattled off coordinates. "It's using the girl's voice." Static, then Carter's voice carefully controlled. "Copy. Do not engage. Do not respond. Move to rally point Bravo. Now." We started backing away slowly, trying to move quietly. The voice kept calling, sometimes crying, sometimes screaming, always getting closer. Then I saw it, through the trees. Nothing in my life had prepared me for what I saw. It was tall,
7 feet at least, and so thin it looked like a skeleton wrapped in gray, leathery skin. Its limbs were too long, the joints bending at wrong angles. Massive antlers sprouted from a head that was almost human, but not quite. The face elongated into something like a deer's skull, but with human teeth visible in a too wide mouth. And it was staring right at us. "Run," Isaac whispered. We ran. Behind us, the voice changed. The sobbing stopped, replaced by something else, a shriek of rage and hunger that echoed through the forest. I could hear it crashing through the underbrush, moving impossibly fast for something that looked so emaciated. "Don't look back," Isaac shouted. "Just run!" My lungs burned. Branches whipped my face. I could hear it behind us, hear the snap of branches and that terrible shrieking. How was it so fast? How was something that looked half-starved moving like an Olympic sprinter? A gunshot cracked through the forest, then another. I saw Dylan ahead, rifle raised, firing past us. "Get down!" We dove into the dirt as Dylan fired again. The shrieking grew louder, closer, and then silence. I looked back. Nothing. The forest was empty, except for the settling dust and swaying branches. Dylan lowered his rifle, his hands shaking. "Did I hit it?" "Doesn't matter," Carter said, appearing from another direction with the rest of the team. "We need to move now. They hunt in patterns. If the Wendigo is here, it's trying to drive us somewhere." "Drive us where?" I asked. Ezra pointed. "There." Ahead, partially hidden by undergrowth, I could see what looked like an old structure. As we got closer, I realized it was a hunting blind, but ancient, probably decades old. The wood was rotted and covered in moss, and there were bones around it. Lots of bones. "It's a kill site," Anthony said quietly. "Wendigo drives prey here, then." He didn't finish. "We found what was left of the hikers 20 feet from the hunting blind in a small ravine." I won't describe what we found in detail. Some things can't be unseen, and I won't inflict that on anyone reading this. I'll just say that the Wendigo had been feeding, and it had taken its time. 4 young people, 4 lives ended in terror and agony. We called it in, and the official response team arrived by helicopter within 2 hours. A group of grim men in Park Service uniforms who didn't introduce themselves. They took statements, bagged the remains, and told us in no uncertain terms that this was a classified animal attack. Their leader said. Black bear, most likely. Tragic accident. "Those weren't bear injuries," I protested. The man looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "Son, they were bear injuries. Do you understand?" I understood. This is how it worked. How it had always worked. That night, back at the station, we held an unofficial memorial. Carter poured whiskey against regulations, but nobody cared, and we drank to the dead. Not just the 4 hikers, but all of them, all the names in those files, all the people who'd walked into these woods and never walked out. "How do you keep doing this?" I asked. "How do you work here knowing what's out there?" "Someone has to," Carter said simply. "Someone has to try to keep people safe, to keep the numbers down. It's not enough, but it's something. The Wendigo is still out there." "They're always out there," Ezra said. "All 3 of them, sometimes more. This forest is huge, 2.1 million acres, plenty of room for things to hide. We do what we can. We patrol, we watch, we report. Sometimes we can steer people away from the dangerous areas. Sometimes we can't." I thought about quitting that night. I could transfer, go back to Colorado, or take a job in an office somewhere, pretend I'd never seen what I'd seen. But I knew I wouldn't. because Carter was right. Someone has to do this. Someone has to stand between ordinary people and the nightmare things that lived in the deep woods. I just didn't know that my real test was still coming. That was when Thomas arrived. Thomas Blackwood showed up at our station 3 days after the incident, driving a beat-up Jeep with Ontario plates. He was Ojibwe, maybe 60 years old, with long gray hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of a hard life. He walked with a limp, using a carved walking stick, and when Carter saw him pull up, I saw something I'd never seen before. My supervisor looked scared. Shit, 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 Carter muttered. You know him? I asked. Thomas is complicated. He's a tribal elder from the Lek to Flambeau reservation. He's also the closest thing to an expert on the Wendigo that exists. Thomas came in without knocking, moving through the station like he owned it. He nodded to Carter, surveyed the rest of us with dark, knowing eyes, and said, "It's getting worse." "We know," Carter said. 4 hikers last week, 2 before that. The pattern is accelerating. "Not just here," Thomas said, settling into a chair with a wince. "Reports are coming in from the Canadian side, too. Disappearances, strange tracks, sightings. Something has changed. The boundaries that used to hold them, they're not holding anymore." He pulled out a map of the region, spreading it across the table. It was marked with symbols I didn't recognize. Concentric circles, triangles, crosshatches in different colors. My people have been tracking these creatures for generations. We've known about them longer than your park service has existed, longer than this country has existed. We learned to live with them, to respect the boundaries. Certain areas were forbidden, sacred spaces where the creatures lived. We left offerings at the borders, performed ceremonies to maintain the balance. "What kind of balance?" I asked. Thomas looked at me with eyes that seemed to see right through me. "You've seen it. The Wendigo. You survived an encounter." It wasn't a question. Somehow he knew. The Wendigo is not just a monster, it's a warning, a cautionary tale made flesh. In the old times, during the worst winters when people were starving, sometimes they would turn to cannibalism to survive. But eating human flesh came with a curse. You became Wendigo, forever hungry, forever wanting, never satisfied. The more you ate, the larger you grew. But your hunger grew even faster. He tapped the map. The creature in these woods. There may be more than one now. They were human once. Loggers, probably, from the 1800s. Men who got lost, starving, desperate. They ate each other to survive. And then they weren't men anymore. Can they be killed? Jaden asked. Yes, but not easily. The old ways say you must burn them completely. Reduce them to ash, or they'll heal from almost any wound. Your bullets will slow them down, but they won't stop them permanently. Carter leaned forward. You said boundaries aren't holding. What did you mean? Thomas's expression darkened. For decades, the creatures mostly stayed in the deep woods, away from people. But in the last few years, they've been ranging farther, coming closer to inhabited areas, attacking more frequently. Something has changed in the forest. Something fundamental. I've seen signs. The trees dying in certain areas, strange fungi growing, water sources drying up. The forest itself is sick. Sick how? Isaac asked. I don't know,
But when the natural world becomes unbalanced, the unnatural things grow stronger. They feed on the disruption, the decay, and they grow bold. Over the next week, Thomas stayed at the station, teaching us what he knew. He showed us how to identify signs of creature activity, not just tracks, but territorial markings, kill patterns, migration routes. He taught us protective prayers, though he warned they were only marginally effective. The old ways worked when there was balance, he said, when the creatures were rare and the land was healthy. Now we're in survival mode. He took us into the forest, showing us sites that had been marked as sacred or forbidden by his ancestors. Ancient stones with symbols carved into them, half buried by centuries of soil. Trees with unusual growth patterns that served as warnings. And in one place, deep in Sector 9, a circle of standing stones that radiated an almost palpable sense of wrongness. This was a Wendigo den, Thomas explained. Hundreds of years ago. See how nothing grows within the circle. The corruption goes deep into the earth. Places like this need to be avoided. The creatures are drawn back to them. That night, Linton and Maverick, two of our seasonal rangers who'd been on a long patrol, came back with disturbing news. They'd found another abandoned campsite, this one in Sector 12. A solo hiker, presumed to be a man named Elias Morrison from what they could determine from the gear left behind. Recent? Carter asked. Within the last day, Lincoln confirmed. Same pattern as before. Everything left behind, signs of a hasty departure. But this time, we found something else. He showed us photos on his digital camera. More bones arranged in patterns, and something that looked like crude symbols carved into tree bark. Combinations of circles and lions that made my eyes hurt to look at. The Wendigo is marking territory, Thomas said immediately, expanding its hunting grounds. This is very bad. We need to do something, I said. We can't just wait for more people to die. What do you suggest? Carter asked, but his tone said he already knew the answer. We hunt it, Jaden said. We find it and we end it. The room went silent. Finally, Anthony spoke up. That's suicide. We're not equipped for that. We're rangers, not soldiers. Then we get equipped, Jaden replied. Thomas said it can be killed. Fire, right? We can do that. We organize, we plan, we go in prepared. And if we fail, Ezra asked quietly, if we go out there and don't come back, then we fail, Jaden said. But at least we tried. At least we did something besides waiting for the next victims. I found myself nodding. So did Gabrielle and Isaac. Even Luca, who'd been quiet throughout all of this, spoke up. I'm in. Carter looked at each of us, then at Thomas. What do you think? The old man was quiet for a long time. In the old days, when a Wendigo became too dangerous, too bold, the tribes would send their warriors to hunt it. It was dangerous, and men died. But sometimes they succeeded. If you're going to do this, you need to do it right. You need to prepare, and you need to respect what you're facing. Then that's what we'll do, Carter decided. Thomas, will you help us? That's why I came, Thomas said. I had a vision 3 weeks ago. I saw the Wendigo grown fat on death, spreading its corruption, and I saw fire in the forest. I came to see if I could change what I saw or help it happen. Over the next 2 days, we prepared. Thomas instructed us in making specific weapons. Wooden stakes sharpened and hardened in fire. Containers of accelerant that we could use to immolate the creature. Anthony and Dylan requisitioned additional firearms from the regional office, claiming we'd had aggressive bear encounters. Not entirely a lie. We studied the patterns of disappearances and sightings, trying to predict where the Wendigo would be. Thomas performed ceremonies each night, blessing our weapons and offering prayers to what he called the old powers. I don't know if this will work, he admitted. The protections are weak now, but it's better than nothing. On the third day, we got the call that would change everything. A ranger from the northern station, Josiah, reported massive tracks and signs of a large kill in Sector 7.
The weeks following the Wendigo's death were deceptively quiet. Isaac recovered, though he'd carry the scars for the rest of his life. We filed our reports, which were promptly classified and buried. The official story was that Elias Morrison's death was a bear attack, just another tragic accident in the wilderness. But the forest knew better, and so did we. October turned cold fast that year. By mid-October, we were seeing nighttime temperatures in the 20s, and early snow dusted the peaks. The tourist season ended, and the woods fell silent. This should have been our slow time, when we could focus on maintenance and preparation for winter. Instead, the incidents accelerated. Caleb and Christopher, two experienced hunters from Grand Marais, vanished during bow hunting season. Their truck was found at a trailhead in Sector 11, their gear still inside. We found their stands 3 miles in, both empty, both showing signs of a hasty exit. Blood on one of the platforms, but not much. A few scraps of clothing caught on branches, and tracks. Massive tracks in the soft earth showing something walking on 2 legs. Each print showed clear claw marks, 4 toes, and a dew claw like a canine, but far too large. The stride length suggested a creature at least 7 feet tall. Dogman, Ezra said, crouching by the tracks. And a big one. We'd been so focused on the Wendigo that we'd almost forgotten the other creatures. That was a mistake. The search for Caleb and Christopher lasted 3 days. We found Christopher's body on day 2, wedged in a rocky crevice. The medical examiner's report, the real one, not the public version, noted injuries consistent with a large predator. Bite marks on the bones showing a jaw structure that didn't match any known animal. Claw marks that rad through clothing and flesh. We never found Caleb. The dog man had taken him deeper into its territory, and we weren't equipped to follow. 3 days later, a family of 4 was attacked at their remote cabin on the edge of the forest. They survived, barely, because the father, a man named Charles, was a veteran who kept a rifle by his bed. He woke to the sound of something trying to break down their door and fired through the wood. The thing outside howled, a sound somewhere between a wolf and a human scream, and fled. When we arrived at dawn, we found claw marks on the door, 4 inches deep, blood on the porch where Charles had hid it, and in the snow, those tracks leading away into the forest. Charles was shaking when we interviewed him, his wife Amelia holding their 2 young children close. It was huge, he said, stood like a man but had the head of a dog or wolf. The eyes, Jesus, the eyes were intelligent. It wasn't just an animal, it was thinking, planning. It tried the door handle first before it started trying to break in. We secured the cabin, helped the family pack, and escorted them to town. They moved away within a week. I don't blame them, but the incident had consequences. Charles had wounded the dog man, and now it was angry. The attacks increased in frequency and violence. Ezekiel, a local guide who'd worked these woods for 30 years, was killed on October 23rd. His body was found by his son, Miles, who'd gotten worried when his father didn't return from a routine supply run. The attack happened in broad daylight on a well-traveled forest road. Whatever killed Ezekiel had been bold enough to hunt in daylight, confident enough to attack a man in a vehicle. Miles found his father's truck pulled off the road, driver's door torn completely off its hinges. The steering wheel was bent, covered in blood, and Ezekiel, what we found of Ezekiel, was scattered across a 1/4 mile of forest. "This is different from the Wendigo," Carter said as we examined the scene. The Wendigo is an ambush predator, patient, strategic. This is something else. This is rage. Thomas's words came back to me. The Dogman is more aggressive, more predatory. We held a meeting that night. All the rangers from our station, plus the crews from the 2 neighboring stations, 23 of us in total. Carter laid out the situation bluntly. "We have a wounded, angry Dogman hunting in our territory," he said. "It's escalating. The attacks are getting bolder, more frequent. Eventually, it's going to hit a populated area. We need to act before that happens." "We barely survived the Wendigo," Anthony pointed out, "and that was with Thomas's help. He's not here now." "No, but we know more than we did before," Carter replied. "We know the creatures can be killed with conventional means if you hit them hard enough. We have experience now, and we don't have a choice." Jackson, one of the rangers from the North Station, spoke up. "Do we even know where it is?" "I think I do," I said. "I'd been studying the patterns, marking attack sites on a map. Look at the locations. They're all in roughly the same area, radiating out from Sector 11. There's an old fire tower there, abandoned since the 70s. It's in an elevated position, provides a view of a large area. If I was a territorial predator, that's where I'd make my den." Carter studied the map. "It's a possibility. We should scout it out." "Scout it out with what?" Dylan asked. "We don't have Thomas's protections this time. We barely have enough firepower." "Then we get more," JD said. "There are people we can call. Hunters, trappers, people who know these woods and know what's out there. People who've seen things and stayed quiet about it because nobody would believe them." Over the next 2 days, we made calls, quietly, carefully, reaching out to people we trusted. Men like Isaiah and Andrew, local hunters who'd seen the creatures and survived. Joshua, a trapper who'd been working the Canadian side and had his own stories. Nathan, who ran a survival training school and taught courses on dangerous wildlife. By October 27th, we had assembled a group of 15 men, all armed, all experienced, all willing to face the impossible because they understood the stakes. We went over the plan carefully. 2 teams. One would approach the fire tower from the east, making noise and drawing attention. The second team would circle around from the west, cutting off escape routes. If we could corner it, trap it in the tower, we could bring the whole structure down with explosives. Nolan, who'd worked in mining before becoming a ranger, assured us he could rig it. "The key is not letting it escape into the forest," Carter said. "If it gets away wounded, it'll be even more dangerous. We do this right, or we don't do it at all." We set out at dawn on October 28th. The weather had turned, heavy clouds hanging low, threatening snow. The forest was dead silent, which we'd learned was a bad sign. The animals knew something was wrong. The fire tower was 5 miles in, up a steep ridge. We split into our teams at the base, checking equipment one last time. I was with Carter's group, the distraction team. Jaden led the other group, taking Ezra, Gabriel, Isaac, Luca, and several of the volunteers. "Remember," Carter said before we split up, "this thing is smart and fast. If it charges you, don't hesitate. Shoot for center mass. Keep shooting until it's down. And watch above. These things climb." We started our approach, making our way up the ridge with deliberate noise, talking, breaking branches, letting the Dogman know we were coming. The idea was to make it focus on us while Jaden's team got into position. The fire tower came into view through the trees, a 50-foot metal structure, the cabin at the top long since fallen into disrepair. The stairs looked unstable, covered in rust and missing sections. Around the base, we found evidence of habitation. Bones, mostly animal, but some human. Tufts of dark fur caught on metal, and a smell, wet dog, and something fouler, like infected wounds. "It's here," Adrian whispered. A howl echoed from somewhere above. I looked up and saw it. The dogman stood on the platform of the fire tower, silhouetted against the gray sky. Even from 100 feet away, I could see the massive form, 7 feet of muscle and fur, standing upright on digigrade legs. Its head was wrong, a wolf skull stretched too large, with ears that swiveled independently to track sounds, and it was looking right at us. "Spread out," Carter shouted. "Don't give it a single target." The dogman leapt, not climbed down, leapt. It jumped from the 50-feet platform, covering the distance to the ground in one bound that should have broken its legs. Instead, it landed in a crouch and immediately charged. We opened fire, 15 rifles and several pistols, all firing at once. I saw bullets hit, saw fur and flesh tear, but the creature kept coming. It was fast, faster than anything that size should be. It covered the ground in huge, loping strides, and then it was among us. Cameron went down first. The dogman's jaws closed around his shoulder and shook him like a terrier with a rat. I heard bones crunch. Santiago tried to help and got backhanded 20 feet through the air. More gunfire. The creature dropped Cameron and turned, blood dripping from its muzzle. Its eyes met mine, and I saw intelligence there. Not animal cunning, actual intelligence, understanding, hate. An explosion rocked the fire tower. Nolan had triggered his charges early, bringing the whole structure crashing down. The dogman glanced at the falling metal, then back at us. It howled again, that terrible half-human sound, and disappeared into the forest so fast I barely saw it move. "After it," Carter shouted. "Don't let it escape." We crashed through the underbrush, following the blood trail. The dogman was wounded. We'd hit it multiple times, but it was still moving fast. Too fast. Gunshots ahead. Jaden's team engaging. We emerged into a small clearing to find chaos. The dogman had circled around and hit them from behind. Eli was down, Aaron trying to drag him to safety. Ryan fired his rifle point-blank into the creature's side, and it barely flinched. The dogman grabbed Ryan's rifle and yanked, pulling him off balance. Its jaws opened, going for his throat. A truck horn blared. Angel, one of the volunteer hunters, had driven his pickup right into the clearing, bouncing over roots and rocks. He slammed into the dogman at full speed, sending the creature tumbling. "Get in," Angel shouted. We didn't need to be told twice. Those of us still standing piled into and onto the truck. Angel threw it in reverse, tires spitting dirt. Behind us, the dogman rose, shook itself, and charged again. "Faster," someone screamed. Angel floored it, the truck fishtailing as it crashed back down the trail. I looked back and saw the dogman following, keeping pace despite its injuries. How was it still moving? How many bullets had hit it? Cooper, hanging onto the truck bed, raised his rifle and fired. So did Woon and Easton. The combined firepower finally had an effect. The dogman stumbled, fell, rose again, but slower. It gave one last howl, defiant, furious, and retreated into the forest. We didn't stop until we were back at the station. Once inside, with the doors locked and weapons loaded, we took stock. Cameron was dead, his injuries too severe. Eli had a broken arm and deep lacerations. Santiago had a concussion. Several others had minor injuries. And the dogman was still out there, wounded but alive. "We failed," I said. "No," Carter replied. "We hurt it badly. It'll need time to heal, time to recover. That gives us time to prepare, to regroup. But I could see the doubt in his eyes. We brought 15 armed men against the dogman, and we'd barely survived. How many times could we do this? How many more would die? That night, as I lay in my bunk, I heard it in the distance, that terrible howling. The dogman was out there in the darkness, calling its rage to the sky. And I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The dogman attack had rattled us, but worse was coming. As November arrived and the first real snow fell, we started receiving reports from the Canadian side. A creature matching the Yenskwa description, what most people called Bigfoot, had been seen moving south, seemingly following the river valleys that connected the wilderness areas. Migration pattern, Kai explained. He was a wildlife biologist who consulted for the Park Service and knew more than he should about the creatures. Happens every few years. Something disrupts them in their usual territory. Could be fire, could be human activity, could be competition from other predators, and they move, looking for new territory. Which means it's coming here, Christian said. It's already here, Carter corrected, showing us fresh reports. 3 sightings in the last week, all in the northern sectors. And yesterday, Landon and Colton found this. He showed us photographs. A deer carcass in a tree, twisted into an impossible position 20 feet up. The body had been crushed before being placed there. Ribs shattered, spine broken. This wasn't about eating. This was a warning. Territorial display, Kai confirmed. The Go Squad does this to warn others, including us, to stay out of its area. Problem is, its area seems to be expanding rapidly. Thomas had warned us. Bigfoot usually avoids humans, he had said. But when pushed, when desperate, they become aggressive. They're incredibly strong, strong enough to snap a man's spine like a twig. And they hold grudges. We thought we had time. We were wrong. On November 3rd, Roman and Hunter went out on routine patrol in Sector 4. They reported in at noon. Everything normal. At 3 p.m., when they missed their scheduled check-in, we knew something was wrong. Connor and Micah found their truck 3 hours later, parked on a service road.
The Yanoskoa tried to dodge, but the snare held it in place. 2 of the trees missed. The third hit it squarely across the back, driving it to the ground. We moved in, all teams converging. The Yanoskoa wasn't dead, wasn't even unconscious, but it was pinned, trapped under hundreds of pounds of tree trunk. Net it, Carter ordered. We threw heavy-duty cargo netting over the creature, securing it with anchors driven deep into the ground. The Yanoskoa thrashed and roared, but the combination of the tree and the netting held. What now? Sawyer asked. We can't just leave it here. Carter pulled out a sat phone. Now, we call the specialists. They arrived by helicopter 6 hours later. Men in unmarked vehicles with no identification. They wouldn't tell us their names or which agency they worked for. They just loaded the still struggling Yanoskoa into a specialized container and flew away. Where are they taking it? I asked Carter. I don't ask questions I don't want answered, he replied. It's out of our territory. That's all that matters. But was it? That night, as we celebrated our victory, if you could call it that, Brooks raised a troubling point. We caught 1 Yanoskoa, he said. How do we know there's only 1? Carter was silent for a long moment. We don't. It's been 6 months since that November. Winter came and went, brutal and cold. The forest was quiet during those months, as quiet as it ever gets in the deep woods. With spring, the tourists returned, and so did the patrols. We haven't had a major incident since the Yanoskoa capture. A
A few strange tracks here and there, some weird sounds at night, but nothing concrete. I don't think it's over. The forest is too big, too wild. Thomas was right. There are boundaries that aren't holding anymore. The creatures are coming closer to inhabited areas, getting bolder. We stopped 3 of them, but at what cost? How many died? How many will die next time? I'm writing this account because people need to know. The official records will call it all accidents, animal attacks, people getting lost. But anyone reading this who works in the national forests, anyone who spends time in the deep wilderness, needs to understand you're not at the top of the food chain out there. There are things in the forests, the wendigo, the dogman, the Yanoskoa, maybe others we haven't encountered yet. They're real, they're dangerous, and they're not going away. I still work as a ranger. Bennett, Silas, Damien, Vincent, and Chase joined our team this spring. New recruits who need to learn the truth. Last week I took them aside and told them everything. Some didn't believe me. That's fine. They will, because sooner or later everyone who works these woods long enough sees something, hears something, feels the presence of something unnatural moving through the trees. The question isn't whether the monsters are real. The question is whether you'll survive your encounter with them. Stay in groups, stay armed, stay alert, and if you hear something in the forest that sounds almost human but not quite, run. Don't investigate. Don't try to help. Just run. Because out there, in the deep woods, in the spaces between the trees where the light doesn't reach, they're waiting. Always waiting. Always hungry. My name is Harrison, and I'm a park ranger in the Superior National Forest. This is my true account, and if you're reading this, I pray you never have to write one of your own. The briefing room at Fort Carson was emptier than usual. Just 5 of us sitting in folding chairs, watching Colonel Hendricks pace in front of a projection screen that showed nothing but static. That should have been my first warning. What you're about to hear doesn't leave this room, Hendricks said, his voice flat and rehearsed. As of 0600 hours, you 5 have been reassigned to Special Access Program Theta 9. Your previous unit records will show you've been deployed overseas. Your families will receive standard communications. In reality, you'll be operating on American soil. I glanced at Silas Martinez, sitting next to me. We'd served together for 3 years, survived 2 tours in places that didn't officially exist. His jaw was tight, eyes fixed forward. If he was worried, he wasn't showing it. The designation is simple, Hendricks continued. You are now part of Cryptid Response Unit 4. Your mission is containment, investigation, and elimination of anomalous entities on domestic soil. Someone laughed. I think it was Patterson, the new guy. He stopped when nobody joined him. You think I'm joking, Sergeant? Hendricks turned, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Real bone-deep fear. 2 weeks ago, we lost an entire team at a location in Utah. 12 trained operators. We found pieces of 3 of them. The others just vanished. The last transmission we received was screaming. The room got cold. The facility is called Skinwalker Ranch, and I felt something in my gut twist. I'd heard stories. Every soldier from the Southwest had heard stories. Things your grandmother warned you about. Things you didn't speak about after dark. Native American legends? Silas finally spoke up, his voice steady. Navajo, specifically witches who can transform into animals, walk in their skin, not legends. Hendricks corrected. The government acquired the property in 2016 through a shell corporation. Since then, we've documented over 300 anomalous events, livestock mutilations, unexplained electromagnetic phenomena, and sightings. Lots of sightings. He clicked a button, and the static on the screen resolved into a grainy photograph. It showed something that might have been a wolf standing upright on its hind legs. Its proportions were all wrong. Arms too long, spine bent at an impossible angle. But it was the eyes that made my blood run cold. They were human eyes. This was taken by a motion sensor camera 3 days ago, 4 hours before the team went silent. "What's the mission?" I asked, finding my voice. "Recovery and reconnaissance. We need to know what happened to CRU-3. We need to know if the site is compromised, and we need to know if containment is still possible." He paused. "If it's not, you have authorization to use any means necessary to neutralize the threat. Any means." That was Corporal Jackson, our demolitions expert. "Any means?" Hendricks confirmed. "You deploy at 4 a.m. Unmarked transport, non-standard equipment. You'll be briefed on special protocols en route." He looked at each of us in turn. "Gentlemen, nothing in your training has prepared you for this. Trust your instincts, trust each other. And whatever you do, don't go anywhere alone after dark." "What about during the day?" Patterson asked. Hendricks' expression didn't change. "They hunt whenever they want." We flew out of Peterson Air Force Base before dawn in a blacked-out Osprey with no markings. Besides me, Silas, Patterson, and Jackson, there was Sergeant Chin, our communications specialist, and the only one of us who didn't look terrified.
The doors were open, the engine still warm, no signs of struggle, no blood. The men were simply tracks. Connor radioed back. "We need to see this." We mobilized a search team immediately. When we reached the truck, I understood Connor's reaction. The tracks around the vehicle were massive, 18 inches long, showing 5 distinct toes, human-like but far too large. The stride suggested something at least 8 feet tall, and the depth of the impressions indicated enormous weight. The tracks led into the forest, and we followed. Not far, maybe 200 yards. Then they stopped at a massive pine tree. Looking up, I saw claw marks on the bark going straight up the trunk 30 feet high. "It climbed," Jeremiah said, his voice tight. "Carrying 2 grown men, climbed like it was nothing." We found Roman's radio on the ground below the tree. Smashed. Nothing else. The search continued for 3 days. We brought in every ranger we could spare, plus volunteers from town. Search dogs wouldn't track. They'd get within 100 yards of the area and refuse to go further, whining and pulling away. On the 3rd day, we found Hunter, or what the Unasqua had left of him. The body was in a rocky outcrop miles from where the men vanished. Hunter had been broken. Every major bone in his body was shattered, but there was minimal blood. The creature had crushed him to death with its bare hands, then carefully placed the body where we'd find it. Another warning. We never found Roman. That night, a town meeting was called. The truth couldn't be completely hidden anymore. Too many deaths. Too many strange circumstances. The official explanations were wearing thin. "People are scared," the mayor said. He was a man named Adam, pragmatic and direct. "They want answers. Real answers." Carter stood before the crowd of maybe 100 people. "There are dangerous animals in these woods," he said carefully. "More dangerous than normal wildlife. We're doing everything we can to address the situation, but until we do, I'm recommending people stay out of the forest, except in groups, armed, and during daylight hours only." "What kind of animals?" someone shouted. "The kind that don't exist in textbooks," Carter replied. "The kind your grandparents warned you about." Aden, an old-timer who'd lived in the area for 80 years, stood up. "He means the Unasqua, the forest giants. My grandfather saw one in 1952, took 3 men with rifles to drive it off. It killed 2 of them first." The crowd erupted in argument, some believing, some skeptical, all afraid. That night, as I walked back to the station with the others, Grace and one of our newer rangers asked the question we were all thinking. Can we even stop it? The Wendigo was smart, but we could hurt it with fire. The Dogman was fast, but it could be injured with bullets. But this thing,
How do you fight something that can snap a man in half? No one had an answer. The Unexplained struck again 2 days later. A hunting party. Jordan, Ian, and Carson were attacked at dawn. Only Carson survived, and only because the creature was focused on the other two. He ran for 3 miles straight, not looking back, and collapsed at a ranger station, hyperventilating and crying. 10 feet tall, he gasped, maybe more. Dark brown fur, arms like tree trunks. Jordan shot it 3 times, center mass. It didn't even slow down, didn't even flinch. It just reached out and grabbed him. I heard the bones breaking. God, I heard it. Carter made a decision. We can't fight this thing directly. We need to outsmart it, drive it out of our territory, back into the deep wilderness where there aren't people. How? I asked. The same way Native Americans did. We make this area unpleasant. Loud noises, fires, aggressive patrols. Make it decide this territory isn't worth the trouble. We implemented the plan over the next week. Sound cannons at the territory boundaries, devices designed to scare wildlife with periodic loud bangs, controlled burns in strategic areas to remove cover, constant round-the-clock patrols by armed teams. It seemed to work. The sightings dropped off. The territorial displays stopped. For 3 days, we dared to hope. Then Axel vanished while checking one of the sound cannons. His team found the device ripped from its mounting and thrown 200 yards into the woods. Axel's hat lay nearby, covered in blood. It's adapting, Kai said. Getting smarter, more aggressive. The tactics that might have worked before, they're not working now. Something has changed in how it's behaving. That night, we held a strategy meeting. Everyone was exhausted, scared, but determined. Jay suggested we bring in the military, but Carter shook his head. They deny everything and shut us down. This has to be handled quietly. Then we need different tactics, Dominic said. We're acting like prey. Maybe it's time to be predators. Leonardo, a former Special Forces operator turned ranger, stood up. I've been thinking about this. The creature is strong and tough, but it's not invincible. We've been trying to fight it on its terms. What if we don't? What do you mean? Carter asked. Traps, pitfalls, the kinds of things that take advantage of its weight and size. It's intelligent, but it's still following animal patterns. We can exploit that. Over the next 3 days, we constructed trap systems in areas where the Unexplained had been active. Deep pits covered with camouflage netting, snare traps made from steel cable strong enough to hold vehicles, and as a last resort, several locations where we'd rigged trees to fall if triggered. Bryson and Everett took the point on the tech side, setting up trail cameras and motion sensors so we'd know when the creature was moving through an area. The waiting was terrible. Every day brought new reports of encounters. The creature circling campsites, leaving massive tracks near hiking trails, breaking trees as territorial displays. It was escalating, becoming more bold. On November 18th, one of the motion sensors triggered. The Unexplained was moving through Sector 8, heading toward one of our trap areas. All teams, this is it, Carter radioed. Everyone to your positions. Remember the plan. My team, Parker, Caden, Weston, and myself, was responsible for the western containment line. If the creature tried to escape that direction, we were supposed to drive it back toward the traps. We heard it before we saw it. Branches breaking, heavy footfalls shaking the ground. Then it emerged from the tree line, and I got my first clear look at the Unexplained. It was massive, at least 9 feet tall, maybe closer to 10, covered in dark brown fur that looked almost black in the shadows. The face was flatter than a gorilla's, more human-like, with intelligent eyes that surveyed the forest with clear purpose. The arms hung past its knees, ending in hands that looked capable of crushing stone. And it was angry. I could see it in the way it moved, the way it bared its teeth. We'd been harassing it for weeks, and now it had had enough. The creature moved toward the trap area, and for a moment I thought it would just walk right in. It stopped, turned its massive head, examining the ground. Had it sensed something? Could it see the covered pit? "Come on, Parker," whispered beside me. "Keep moving." The Unasqua sniffed the air, looked directly at our hiding position. Its eyes met mine, and I saw recognition there. It knew we were watching. It knew this was a trap. And it charged. Not toward the trap, toward us. "Run!" Caden screamed. We ran, crashing through the forest. I could hear it behind us, could feel the ground shake with each of its massive strides. It was toying with us. Could have caught us easily if it wanted. A roar from ahead. Carter's team firing warning shots, trying to turn the creature. The Unasqua veered left, suddenly changing direction, and hit one of the cable snares. The steel cable snapped tight around its leg with a crack like a gunshot. The creature roared, a sound that echoed through the forest like thunder. It pulled against the cable, the tree it was anchored to, groaning and bending. "Hit the trees!" Leonardo shouted. "Now!" Jason and Emmett triggered their devices. 3 massive pines, pre-cut and rigged with cables, toppled directly toward the struggling creature.
The Loadmaster handed out equipment I'd never seen before. Night vision goggles with extra filters. Audio equipment that looked like it belonged in a recording studio. And weapons. Not our standard M4s. These were different. Silver ammunition, Silas said, examining a magazine. They actually gave us silver ammunition. Blessed by a Catholic priest, a Navajo medicine man, and a rabbi, the Loadmaster said, without a trace of humor. Covers most bases. You've also got white ash rounds, cold iron fragmenting bullets, and standard ball ammunition. Rotate your magazines if you need sustained fire. I held up one of the strange devices. What's this? EM detector. If the readings spike above 7 milligauss, you've got company. Might be invisible, but it'll register. He handed me another piece of equipment. This is an ultrasonic deterrent. Frequency is set to 19 kilohertz. Might not stop them, but it'll slow them down. Hurts their ears when they're in animal form. When they're in animal form, Jackson repeated slowly. Jesus Christ. He won't help you out there, the Loadmaster said. But maybe he'll help you make it back. The flight took 4 hours. We landed at a small airstrip outside of Roosevelt, Utah, where 2 armored Humvees were waiting. No drivers. Keys in the ignition. We're on our own? Patterson asked. From here on, Chen confirmed, checking her satellite uplink. Command can monitor us, but extraction will take minimum 2 hours if we call for it. The ranch is 40 miles from the nearest populated area. We loaded up and drove south. The landscape was beautiful in a desolate way. Red rock formations, scrub brush, endless sky. It reminded me of home. My grandmother had grown up near Shiprock. She had told me stories about the Yinaldoi, the skinwalkers. I'd laughed them off as superstition. I wasn't laughing now. Skinwalker Ranch appeared like a wound in the landscape. 500 acres of fenced property with a main compound at the center. As we approached, I could see the fence, 12 feet high, topped with razor wire. But there were gaps. Large sections had been torn down, the metal twisted like aluminum foil. Something really wanted in, Silas muttered. Or out.
We stopped at the main gate. It hung open, swaying slightly in the wind. Beyond it, I could see the compound. Several buildings, guard towers, and in the distance, some kind of observation post built on a ridge. "Radio check," Chen said. "Testing communications." "Command, this is CRU-4. We are on site. Do you copy?" Static. "Command, this is CRU-4. Please acknowledge." More static, then a voice, broken and distorted. "Stay in the light. Don't trust Mum Cyber watching. Always watching." Then silence. "That wasn't protocol," Jackson said. "That wasn't even complete sentences," Patterson added, his voice higher than normal. I stepped out of the Humvee, rifle up, scanning the compound. Nothing moved, not even birds. The silence was absolute and unnatural. "Formation," I ordered. "Silas, take point. Jackson, rear guard. Patterson, Chen, middle." We clear each building systematically. Nobody goes anywhere alone. We moved through the gate. The moment we crossed the threshold, I felt it, a pressure in the air, like the atmosphere itself was watching us. My EM detector began clicking softly. 3 milligauss, 45. "Anyone else feel that?" Patterson whispered. "Yes," Silas said. "We're not alone." The first building was the command center. The door was closed but unlocked. Silas stacked up on one side. I took the other. Chen prepared to breach. 3, 2, 1. We flooded inside, weapons up, lights cutting through the darkness. The scene that greeted us would have made more sense if I could say it looked like a battle had taken place. But it didn't. It looked like reality itself had been torn apart. Blood on the walls, not splattered, smeared in patterns that hurt to look at. Symbols that seemed to writhe in our flashlight beams. Equipment destroyed, not broken, melted, fused together in impossible ways. And in the center of the room, a perfect circle of ash. "CRU-3, Chen breathed, moving to a computer terminal. Miraculously, it still had power. She pulled up the last log entries. Final entry was 48 hours ago. Team leader reported hearing howling, multiple subjects approaching from all directions. He requested immediate extraction." "What was the response?" I asked. "Denied. They were ordered to hold position and observe." She scrolled further. "Next entry is 1 hour later. Audio only." She clicked play. Even now, writing this months later, I can still hear that recording in my nightmares. Screaming, multiple voices overlapping, but not quite human. Too many syllables, too many tones happening simultaneously. And underneath it all, laughter. Children's laughter. Then a voice gasping, "They're not animals. They're not animals. They're wearing, oh God, they're wearing..." The recording cut off. "Wearing what?" Patterson asked. Silas was staring at the circle of ash, his face pale. "Wearing us. They're wearing us." That's when we heard it, from somewhere outside. A sound that started as a coyote's howl, but warped, stretched, became something that mimicked human speech. Words in English, broken and wrong. Welcome home, soldiers, come play. My EM detector shrieked. 15 milligauss, 20, 30. They're here, I said, chambering around. Lock this building down. We're not going out there in the dark. But as I moved to secure the door, I saw something through the window that made my blood freeze. Figures surrounding the compound. Dozens of them, some on 2 legs, some on 4, some moving in ways that didn't correspond to any anatomy I could recognize. And they were all watching us with eyes that reflected our flashlights like animals. Too late, silent, one of the figures wheezed. CRU-4, this is command. Stand down and exit the building with your hands visible. That's not command, Chen whispered, backing away from the window. The thing smiled, revealing too many teeth. Come outside, soldiers. Your mission is complete. Time to come home. Around us, the other figures began to move closer, circling the building. Some were still changing, shifting, bones cracking and reforming with sounds like wet wood breaking. I saw one wear the skin of a man, but its face kept sliding, features rearranging like it was trying to remember how to be human. Defensive positions, I ordered, windows and doors, nothing gets in. But even as I said it, I heard something that made me realize how naive that hope was. Scratching from above us, on the roof, something was up there, something heavy.
And it was laughing, with a voice that the siege had begun. The scratching on the chin. Get that terminal working, I ordered. Find us a backup on it. She said, fingers flying across the keyboard, but I could see the fear in her eyes. We all felt it. The wrongness of this place. The sense that we'd walked into something much worse than a simple recovery mission. Patterson had taken position at the western window, his rifle trained on the shapes moving in the darkness. They're just circling, not attacking. Why aren't they attacking? They're testing us, Silas said from the eastern window. Trying to figure out what we'll do, how we'll react. He glanced back at me. My grandmother told me stories. Skinwalkers don't just kill, they corrupt. They break you down mentally before they ever touch you physically. Another voice called out from the darkness, this one perfectly mimicking Patterson's mother. I knew because Patterson made a choking sound, his finger tightening on the trigger. Danny! Danny, baby, is that you? I'm so scared. Please help me, Danny. They're going to hurt me if you don't come out. That's not her, I said sharply. Patterson, that's not your mother. Don't listen. I know, he whispered, but his hands were shaking. I know it's not, but it sounds exactly like her, even the way she used to say my name when I was little. They're reading us, Silas said. Getting into our heads, pulling out memories. How? Jackson demanded from his position at the door. How the hell are they doing that? Does it matter? I snapped. Just don't listen, don't respond, don't give them anything to work with. The roof groaned under moving weight. Then something started clawing at the ceiling tiles. Bits of acoustic panel rained down. Through the gaps, I caught a glimpse of something pale and twisted, with too many joints in its limbs. Jackson, can you blow the roof if we need to? I asked. Blow it with what? I didn't bring enough C4 to demolish a building.
I brought enough for door breaches and maybe collapsing a tunnel. He paused. But I can rig something. Give me 5 minutes and access to their propane tanks outside. Too risky, I said. You'd have to go out there. Got it. Chen's voice cut through our conversation. She'd pulled up a screen showing multiple camera feeds from around the compound. They had an entire surveillance network. Cameras everywhere, and it's all still recording. We gathered around the screen. The feeds showed the perimeter, the other buildings, the guard towers, and something else. Massive shapes moving between the structures. But the most disturbing feed was from inside the building where we'd found the ash circle. It showed CR Crew 3's final moments. I should have ordered Chen to shut it off, but we needed to know what happened. We needed to understand what we were facing. The footage was time-stamped 47 hours prior. It showed 12 soldiers in full tactical gear, setting up a defensive perimeter inside the main command building, the same room where we now stood. They looked confident, professional. They had no idea what was coming. The first sign of trouble came when their communications officer reported hearing voices on the radio, command issuing contradictory orders. Then the voices of dead teammates calling for help. Then the power cut out. In the night vision footage that followed, we watched as shapes began appearing at the windows, not approaching from outside, simply manifesting. One moment nothing, the next something was there, pressed against the glass, features shifting and changing with each flicker of movement. The team held discipline. They followed their training. They didn't panic. It didn't matter. One of the windows shattered inward, and something flowed through. Not walked, not jumped, but flowed like liquid shadow. It resolved into a shape that might have been a coyote, might have been a man, kept switching between the two faster than the eye could track. The soldiers opened fire. We watched their muzzle flashes light up the room, silver rounds just like ours. I saw at least 3 rounds hit the creature directly, watched it jerk and stumble. Then it laughed and kept coming. What followed was butchery. The creature moved impossibly fast, flowing between forms, attacking with claws, teeth, and something else. Just its presence seemed to hurt them. Soldiers dropped their weapons, clutching their heads, screaming about voices, about memories being pulled apart. More shapes poured through the window. The team tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. One by one, they were dragged down. Some were killed quickly, others... The last soldier standing was the team leader. He backed into the center of the room, emptying magazine after magazine. When his ammunition ran out, he pulled a knife. The creatures circled him, taking their time. Then they started talking. They spoke with his voice. They spoke with his wife's voice, his children, his dead brother who'd been killed in Afghanistan. They pulled every intimate detail from his mind and threw it back at him, twisted and wrong. He lasted 3 minutes before he started cutting himself. The knife moving almost on its own, carving symbols into his arms, the same symbols we'd seen smeared on the walls in blood. "Turn it off," I said quietly. "Chen, turn it off." But before she could, the creatures in the footage all stopped at once. They turned toward the camera, toward us, and smiled. Then the feed went dead. "They knew," Silas said. "They knew we'd find this. They wanted us to see." A new voice called from outside, and this one made my stomach drop. It was my own voice, perfect in every detail, even the slight accent I'd never quite lost. Command to CR4. Mission is scrubbed. Proceed to extraction point Alpha. We have assets inbound. Don't respond, Silas warned. I know, I said. But hearing my own voice coming from one of those things was deeply, fundamentally wrong in a way I couldn't explain. It was like looking at your reflection and watching it move differently. The scratching on the roof stopped for a moment. There was perfect silence. Then something dropped down outside the door. I heard it land with a heavy thump. A shadow passed across the gap beneath the door. They're gonna breach, Jackson said, readying his weapon. Let 'em try, I said, moving to better cover. We've got silver rounds, white ash, cold iron. One of these has to work. And if they don't? Patterson asked. Before I could answer, something slammed into the door with tremendous force. The metal buckled, but held. Another impact. The frame began to crack. Fire on breach, I ordered. Controlled bursts. Conserve ammunition. The third impact tore the door from its hinges. It flew across the room, and through the opening came something that defied description. It wore the shape of a bear, but its proportions were wrong. Arms too long, spine bent backward, head rotating on its neck in ways that would break a real animal.
Its fur seemed to ripple and shift, like it was trying to become something else, but couldn't quite remember how. We opened fire simultaneously. Silver rounds struck its chest and face. It roared, a sound that started animal and became human screaming, and stumbled backward. White ash rounds followed, and where they hit, its flesh began to smoke and crack. It's working, Patterson shouted. But then the creature's wounds began to close, not healing, closing. The skin just flowed back together like water filling a hole. And all the while, it was laughing. Keep firing, I yelled, switching to cold iron rounds. These seemed to hurt it more. Each impact made it flinch and hiss, its form flickering between bear and something else, something worse. Then it spoke, and the voice was Colonel Hendricks again. But wrong. Too many tones, too many voices overlapping. You can't kill us, soldiers. We're older than your weapons, older than your silver and your ash and your prayers. We've been here since the first people walked this land. We'll be here long after you're gone. Yeah, Jackson said, pulling the pin on a flashbang. Try this, you piece of... He threw it. The grenade detonated in a burst of light and sound that lit up the room like a small sun. The creature shrieked and recoiled, its form destabilizing, flickering rapidly between a dozen different shapes. The light, Silas shouted. They hate the light. Chen was already moving, flipping on every light switch in the building. Fluorescence flickered to life overhead, and I saw the creatures outside the windows pull back, hissing. The one in the doorway tried to retreat, but we kept firing, driving it back into the darkness. For a moment, we had respite. The building was lit up like a Christmas tree, and the shapes outside kept their distance, circling, but not approaching. I could see them more clearly now in the light from our windows. Dozens of forms, constantly shifting, never staying one shape for more than a few seconds. Some wore animal skins that hung loose and wrong. Others wore human skin, but the faces didn't match. Features sliding around like masks that didn't quite fit. How long can we keep the lights on? I asked Jen. She checked a panel on the wall. Generator has fuel for maybe 6 hours. After that, she didn't need to finish. 6 hours until dawn, I calculated. We can make it. And then what? Patterson asked. You really think they'll just disappear when the sun comes up like vampires?
No, Silas said quietly, still watching the circling shapes. They hunt day and night. The sun won't stop them, but it might slow them down, give us a chance to reach one of the vehicles. Assuming they haven't destroyed them, Jackson added. I moved to the window, careful not to get too close to the glass. The Humvees sat in the compound center, about 50 yards from our position. They looked intact, but in the dancing shadows it was hard to be sure. Chen, can you get a camera feed on the vehicles? She pulled up the relevant cameras. The Humvees appeared undamaged. Wait, she said, zooming in. Look at the tires. All 8 tires on both vehicles had been slashed. Deep claw marks ran along the armored sides. They wanted us to see they could have destroyed them, I said. They're leaving them there as bait. Or they're leaving them there because they don't care, Silas said, because they know we're not going anywhere. A new sound began outside. Howling, not animal howling. Human voices, dozens of them, all howling in unison. The sound built and built, becoming a wall of noise that made my teeth ache. The windows rattled, the fluorescent lights flickered. They're trying to break our concentration, I said, fighting the urge to cover my ears, trying to make us panic. It's working, Patterson admitted, his face pale. The howling stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was somehow worse. Then, from right outside the window next to Silas, a small voice spoke. A child's voice. Please help me. I'm scared. They hurt my mummy. Please, mister, I'm just a little girl. I'm bleeding, the voice continued, and now there was scratching on the glass. Small hands. Please, I'm just 7 years old. I don't want to die out here alone. That's not a child, I said firmly. Silas, do not look. Do not engage. I know, he said, but his voice was strained. But knowing doesn't make it easier. The voice changed, became angry. You're just like the others. You don't care. You're going to let me die just like you let them die. And then it spoke a name.
A name that made Silas go rigid, just like you let Maria die. Who's Maria? I asked quietly. My sister, Silas said, his voice hollow. She died 3 years ago. Car accident. I was supposed to pick her up from school, but I was late. Got held up at the base. By the time I got there, he trailed off. How the hell did they know about that? They're in your head, I said. Reading your memories, your guilt. Don't give them more ammunition. But the voice outside kept going, reciting details that only Silas could know. Personal moments, last words, things his sister had said in the hospital before she died. With each revelation, I watched Silas's hands shake more on his rifle. Silas, I said sharply, look at me. Look at me right now. He tore his gaze from the window, and his eyes were wet with tears. That is not your sister, I said. Your sister is dead. She's at peace. That thing outside is using her memory to hurt you. Don't let it. I know, but it sounds just like her, even the way she used to laugh when I'd tell her stupid jokes. The scratching on the glass intensified, and I saw it now. A small handprint, smeared in something dark. The fingers were too long, the palm too wide. We need a new plan, Jackson said. This building isn't going to hold them off forever. Eventually they'll find a way in, lights or no lights. What about the observation post, Chen suggested, pulling up a map on her terminal. It's on the ridge, about half a click from here. Elevated position, better sight lines. If we can make it there. That's a big if, Patterson interrupted. Half a kilometer through open ground with those things out there? You have a better idea? Chen shot back. I studied the map. The observation post did offer advantages.
higher ground, better defensibility, and according to the schematic, it had its own independent power supply and communications array. If we can reach it, I said slowly, we might be able to call for actual extraction, but we'd need to time it perfectly, create a distraction. I can do that, Jackson said with a grim smile. Those propane tanks I mentioned, there are 3 of them on the north side of the compound. I can rig them to blow on a timer, big enough explosion to draw their attention. How long would you need? 2 minutes to set it up. Then we have whatever time I set the delay for to reach the observation post before the whole thing goes up. And you'd have to do it outside, Silas said, in the dark with them. I don't see another option, Jackson replied, unless you want to wait here for the generator to die and hope they get bored. I looked at each member of my team. Patterson was scared, but holding it together. Chen was focused on her terminal, already calculating distances and timing. Silas had regained his composure, though pain still lingered in his eyes, and Jackson looked almost relieved to have a concrete task. We do this right, we do it once, I said. Jackson rigs the explosion. 3-minute timer. The moment he's back inside, we make a run for the Humvees. Even with slashed tires, they'll provide cover. We use them as a staging point, then sprint for the observation post when the explosion goes up. What about the lights? Patterson asked. The moment we leave this building, we take portable lights, Chen said. Floodlights, flashbangs, flares, anything that can buy us a few seconds. They'll come at us hard, Silas warned. The moment we step outside, they'll know we're making a move. Then we'd better be fast, I said. Jackson, how confident are you that you can set those charges? He met my eyes. Put it this way, sir. I'd rather die trying than wait here for them to break through. I nodded slowly. All right. We prepped for a tremendous crash. Cut me off. One of the windows shattered inward, and something came through. Not the bear thing from before, but something new, something worse. It wore the skin of a man, specifically a soldier, but the skin hung loose like a coat. Underneath, I could see wrong shapes, wrong colors, flesh that pulsed and shifted. And it was wearing a name tape, Martinez, Silas's name. Hello, brother, it said with Silas's voice, smiling with Silas's face. Want to hear about what I'm going to do to your family next? This time, I couldn't stop Silas from firing. The creature wearing Silas's name staggered back as silver rounds tore through his chest. Black ichor sprayed across the floor, smoking where it landed. But instead of falling, it laughed, a sound that started as Silas's laugh and deteriorated into something that made my ears hurt. That tickles, it said, and its face began to shift. Silas's features melted away, replaced by something else. Something I recognized. My face. Stop firing, I shouted at Silas, but he'd already emptied his magazine. The thing with my face tilted its head, studying us with eyes that reflected the fluorescent lights like an animal's. You can't kill what's already dead. You can't kill what was never alive. Weird the space between the absence of meaning, the corruption of form. Get back, I ordered, pulling Silas away from the shattered window. Glass crunched under our boots. More shapes were gathering outside now, drawn by the commotion. I could see dozens, maybe hundreds, all wearing stolen faces and skins. Jackson had moved to the window, firing controlled bursts to drive them back. The cold iron rounds seemed to hurt them more than the silver. Where they hit, the creature's forms destabilized, flickering between shapes like broken television signals. Chen, we're leaving now, I said. Forget the 3-minute timeline. Jackson, how fast can you rig those propane tanks? 90 seconds if I don't worry about being pretty. Then don't worry about being pretty. We're running out of time. The thing with my face pushed back through the window, ignoring the fire gun. Its body absorbed the bullets, flesh rippling and reforming around each impact. Where will you run? We're everywhere. We've always been everywhere. Your fences and gates mean nothing. Your weapons mean nothing. Your prayers mean nothing. Then why waste time with us? Silas snarled, loading a fresh magazine. If we're so insignificant, why waste time with us? The creature paused, and for a moment, something almost human flickered across its stolen features. Because it's fun, it said simply. Because you hope, and hope is delicious when we break it. More windows shattered simultaneously. 3 more creatures poured through, each wearing a different form. A wolf, a bear, something that might have been a mountain lion but with too many legs. The room filled with the stench of rot and copper. Flashbangs! Now! Jackson and Patterson threw simultaneously. The grenades detonated in overlapping bursts of light and sound. The creatures shrieked, their forms destabilizing completely. For a few precious seconds, they were just masses of writhing darkness, unable to maintain any shape. Move! Move! We poured out of the building into the compound center. The night air hit me like a physical force, cold and wrong, charged with something I couldn't name. My EM detector was screaming, the needle buried so far in the red it had stopped moving. The Humvee sat 50 yards ahead, 50 yards that might as well have been 50 miles. Shapes moved in the shadows between buildings. Eyes reflected our weapon lights from every direction. Dozens, hundreds, more than I could count. Formation, I ordered. Tight circle, weapons out. We moved together. We advanced in a tactical cluster. Chen in the center with her communications equipment, the rest of us forming a protective circle around her. Every few seconds, something would dart in from the darkness, testing us, probing for weakness. We fired short bursts, driving them back. They're hurting us, Silas said, watching the patterns. See, they're not actually attacking. They're pushing us towards the Humvees. Why? Patterson asked, his rifle tracking movement in the shadows. Because that's where they want us, I realized. Trapped in the vehicles, surrounded. Nowhere to run. Too late to change course now, Jackson said. We're committed. He was right. We'd crossed the point of no return. Behind us, more creatures were pouring out of the building we just left, cutting off any retreat.
Shapes gathered around the Humvees, waiting. We reached the vehicles. Jackson immediately dropped to the ground, checking underneath. Clear, he said. No explosives, no immediate traps. Why would they need traps? Chen muttered, loading fresh batteries into her communications gear. They have us exactly where they want us. I moved to the driver's door of the nearest Humvee, keeping my rifle up. Through the armored glass, I could see the interior was untouched, keys still in the ignition. But something felt wrong. Don't, Silas said quietly. Don't open it. Why not? I don't know. Just don't. It feels like a trap. I pulled my hand back from the door handle. Silas's instincts had saved us before. I wasn't about to ignore them now. Jackson, how long for those charges? Give me 90 seconds. You've got 60. We're too exposed here. Jackson nodded and sprinted toward the north side of the compound where the propane tank sat in a locked cage. He disappeared into the shadows, and immediately, shapes began to follow him. Cover Jackson, I ordered. Don't let them get close. We opened fire, aiming for anything that moved in his direction. The cold iron round seemed most effective. Where they hit, the creatures would recoil, their stolen forms breaking apart before slowly reforming. But there were so many. For everyone we drove back, 2 more appeared. I'm getting readings, Chen said, frantically adjusting her equipment. Multiple electromagnetic signatures concentrated right around the Humvees. What kind of readings? Like there's something inside them, something generating a massive EM field. I looked at the vehicles with new understanding. They're not transportation. They're bait. Get away from them. Everyone back up. The Humvee's doors exploded outward. From inside each vehicle, something unfolded.
shapes that had been compressed, waiting. They wore military uniforms, or what remained of them. Name tapes torn and bloody, and I recognized the names. CRU-3, the team that had been killed here. But these weren't corpses. These were skinwalkers wearing the dead soldiers' forms. Imperfect copies that got details wrong. Fingers bent backward, eyes on the wrong side of their faces, mouths opening too wide, revealing throats that went down forever. "Hello, CRU-4, they said in unison, 12 voices speaking as one. "We've been waiting inside. Want to see what's inside you?" They rushed us simultaneously. We fired, but there were too many coming from too many angles. I saw Patterson go down, 3 of them piling onto him. He was screaming, but not in pain, in terror. As they whispered in his ears, their hands pressed against his head. "They're reading him," Chen shouted. "They're pulling his memories." Silas grabbed Patterson, trying to pull him free, but one of the creatures caught his arm. It smiled with a soldier's face and began to speak in rapid Spanish. Silas's native language, words I couldn't understand, but that made Silas go rigid with horror. I fired point blank into the creature's head. The cold iron round punched through, and its form dissolved into black smoke. But more were coming. So many more. "Jackson," I screamed into the darkness. "Now! Blow it, now!" From the north side of the compound came an explosion that lit up the night sky. The propane tanks went up in a fireball that briefly turned night into day. The shockwave knocked me off my feet, and I heard creatures shrieking as the light washed over them. "Run!" I grabbed Patterson, hauling him up. Chen and Silas were already moving, firing behind us as they went to the observation post. "Go!" We ran. The compound was chaos now, flames spreading, structures collapsing, and everywhere those things were screaming, but they were falling back from the fire, giving us a window. The observation post sat on a ridge, half a kilometer away. In the firelight, I could see the path leading up to it. We just had to reach it, just had to keep moving. Behind us, something massive roared. I risked a glance back and saw it. Something huge pulling itself out of the earth itself, not wearing a skin, not pretending to be anything, just pure wrongness given form. Too large to fully comprehend, its outline shifting and changing with each movement. "Don't look at it," Silas shouted. "Don't try to understand it. Just run." We ran. My lungs burned, my legs felt like lead, but we ran because stopping meant death, meant worse than death, meant becoming like those things in the Humvees, wearing our own skins wrong, used as puppets and bait. Patterson stumbled, and I caught him. His face was pale, eyes wide with shock. "They showed me," he gasped. "They showed me my death, every version, every possibility. I saw—" "Shut up and run," I said, not unkindly. "You're not dead yet." "But I will be. They showed me. We all will be. That's why they're not trying harder to catch us. Because they know—" "Patterson," I shook him. "Focus. One step at a time. That's all we need. One step." The observation post was getting closer. 100 yards, 75, 50. "Contact," Chen shouted. "Something's ahead of us." I saw it. Shapes materializing on the path in front of us, blocking our route. Not many, maybe 5 or 6, but enough. "Through them," I ordered. "Don't stop. Don't slow down." We hit them at full speed, firing as we went. They tried to grab us, tried to whisper their poison in our ears, but we were moving too fast, our momentum too great. I felt claws rake across my shoulder, felt cold breath on my neck, but then we were through them and still moving. 25 yards, 20, 15. The observation post door was steel, heavy, designed to withstand assault. Chen reached it first, pulling a keycard from her vest. She swiped it, and I heard locks disengage. The door swung open. Inside, everyone inside. We tumbled through the doorway. Jackson was the last in, turning to fire one more burst before Chen slammed the door shut and engaged the locks. Heavy bolts slid into place with satisfying clicks. For a moment, we just stood there, gasping for breath. We'd made it. Somehow, impossibly, we'd made it. Then something started scratching on the door, gently, almost playfully. "It's not over," Silas said quietly. "It's never going to be over." I looked around the observation post. It was a single large room filled with equipment, cameras, computers, communications gear, all still powered and running. One wall was entirely glass, looking out over the compound below. Through it, I could see the fires we'd started slowly dying, and in the darkness beyond, shapes were gathering. So many shapes. "Chen, can you reach command from here?" I asked. She moved to the communications station, putting on a headset. Testing, command. This is CRU-4. Do you copy?" Static. "Command, this is CRU-4. We've reached the observation post, requesting immediate extraction. Multiple hostile contacts. Repeat, requesting immediate extraction." More static, then, faintly, a voice. "CRU-4, negative on extraction. Site is compromised. Must contain." The signal dissolved into interference. "Compromised," Patterson laughed, the sound edging toward hysteria. "The site is compromised. We're compromised. Everything's compromised." "Get it together, Sergeant," I snapped. But I understood his fear. We were trapped in a bunker on a ridge, surrounded by creatures that could wear our faces and read our memories, and Command had just denied our extraction. "There," Chen said, pointing at one of the computer screens. "Camera feed from the perimeter. Look." The screen showed the fence line, or what remained of it. But it also showed something else. Military vehicles, a lot of them. Humvees, APCs, and something bigger. They were arranged in a circle around the entire ranch.
Their lights creating an unbroken perimeter. They're not denying extraction, I realized. They're establishing a quarantine. They're sealing us in. "Sealing us in with those things?" Jackson said. "That's insane." "Not if they think the things might escape," Silas said quietly. "Not if they're willing to sacrifice us to make sure nothing leaves this place." He was right. I'd seen this protocol in briefings. Complete containment. If a site was too compromised, if the risk of breach was too high, you sealed it off. No one in, no one out. Let the problem resolve itself internally, even if that meant losing your own people. "How long do you think we have?" Patterson asked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We all knew the answer. We had until the creatures outside found a way in, until our ammunition ran out, until our will broke, or until Command decided the containment wasn't enough and called in an airstrike. The scratching on the door continued, patient, persistent, and underneath it, I could hear voices, familiar voices. My grandmother speaking Navajo, Silas's sister, Patterson's mother, Jackson's dead squadmates from his last deployment. They knew everything about us, every fear, every regret, every secret we'd tried to bury, and they had all the time in the world to use that knowledge against us. Chen pulled up another camera feed. This one showed the interior of the command center where we'd first holed up. The room was empty now, but smeared on the wall in fresh blood were new symbols. Words in English, written large enough for the camera to read. 5 came in. None will leave, but many will wear your faces. "We need a plan," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady.
Jackson, what's our ammunition status? 3 magazines each of mixed rounds, plus 2 flashbangs, 3 smoke grenades, and 1 thermite grenade. Food, water. There's an emergency supply locker, Chen said, checking. MREs for 3 days, water for 5. Power? Generator and solar panels should last indefinitely if nothing damages them. So we could theoretically hold out here for days, I said. The question is, will Command wait that long before they decide to sterilize this site? You mean nuke it? Patterson said flatly. That's what you mean, isn't it? They'll drop a bomb and pretend it was an earthquake or a military exercise. Maybe, I admitted. But maybe they will wait. Maybe they think we can still complete the mission. What mission? Jackson demanded. Recovery and reconnaissance. Recovery of what? There's nothing left to recover except body parts. And reconnaissance? We've seen what we're up against. We know what killed CRU-3. So why aren't they pulling us out? I didn't have an answer, but looking at the screens, at the creatures circling the observation post, at the military cordon miles away, I had a terrible suspicion. We weren't here to observe and report. We were here to test something, to see how long we could last, to study how the creatures responded to different tactics. We weren't a rescue team. We were an experiment. The scratching stopped abruptly. The sudden silence was almost worse than the sound. I moved to the window, careful not to get too close to the glass. Below, in the firelight, I could see them. Hundreds of shapes, all perfectly still, all facing the observation post. Then, as one, they began to change. The stolen skins and forms fell away, leaving only the darkness beneath. And from that darkness, they began to build something new, something larger. They're merging, Silas whispered. They're all merging into one thing. He was right. The individual entities were flowing together, combining into a single massive form. It grew larger with each passing second, pulling in more and more of itself, becoming something that towered over the compound buildings. When it finally finished, it stood 3 stories tall, a writhing mass of limbs and faces and forms that constantly shifted and changed. But at its center, stable and clear, was a single face. My face. It spoke with a voice like thunder, and every speaker in the observation post crackled to life, broadcasting its words. You wanted to know what killed CRU-3? Now you know. You wanted to contain us? You wanted to study us? You wanted to understand us? The massive form took a step forward, and the earth shook. Equipment fell from shelves. Cracks appeared in the observation post walls. Now, it said, with my voice, my inflection, my mannerisms. Now, let us understand you. It raised one massive limb and brought it down on the observation post's roof. The impact shook the entire structure. Metal groaned, concrete cracked, and somewhere above us, I heard glass shattering. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the lights flickered. Defensive positions, I shouted, but there was nowhere to defend. We were in a box, and something was trying to break the box open. Another impact, harder. One of the computer terminals exploded in a shower of sparks. Chen yanked her hand back just in time to avoid being shocked. The roof's not going to hold, Jackson called out. That thing's too big, too strong. Then we go down, I said, spotting a door I hadn't noticed before. It was set into the floor, partially hidden by equipment. There, emergency access tunnel. Must connect to the underground facility. What underground facility? Patterson asked. I pointed to the schematics Chen had pulled up earlier. Every classified site has underground sections, storage, laboratories, secure areas. There has to be a tunnel system. That's our way out. Out to where? Silas demanded. We're surrounded by miles of creatures and a military cordon that won't let us leave. one problem at a time. I hauled equipment aside, revealing the door fully. It was steel with a biometric lock. Chen, can you crack this? I can try, but another impact cut her off. This time, a section of the roof collapsed entirely, letting in the night air. Through the hole, I could see the creature's mass writhing and reshaping itself. No time for trying. Jackson, blow it. That's our only way out. If I damage the tunnel? If you don't, we're dead in 30 seconds. Blow it. Jackson pulled out his thermite grenade, placed it on the lock, and we all backed up. Fire in the hole. The thermite ignited, burning hot white. The metal melted, running like water. Jackson kicked the door open, revealing a ladder leading down into darkness. Go, go, go! I pushed them toward the opening. Chen went first, then Patterson, then Jackson. Silas hesitated at the edge, looking back at me. What about command? What about the mission? The mission is staying alive. Now move. He went down. I took one last look at the observation post, at the equipment, the computers, all the carefully monitored data designed to study this place. Then I followed my team into the darkness, pulling the metal door shut behind me. The ladder went down 20 feet, emerging into a concrete tunnel lit by emergency strips. The air was cold and smelled of earth and something else, something wrong that I couldn't quite identify. Which way? Patterson asked. The tunnel extended in both directions, disappearing into darkness. Chen, do you have those schematics? I asked. She pulled out her tablet, surprisingly still intact. According to this, the tunnel system is extensive. Multiple levels, storage sections, research areas, emergency exits, but the whole thing is coded. I can't tell what's what. Research areas, Silas said. What were they researching? Before I could answer, a sound echoed down the tunnel behind us. Scraping. Something was forcing open the hatch we'd just come through. East, I decided arbitrarily. We go east. Stay together. Weapons ready. We moved through the tunnel at a jog, our weapon lights cutting through the darkness. The emergency lighting was inconsistent. Some sections were bright, others completely dark. In the dark sections, I could hear things. Movement, breathing, whispers that might have been wind, but probably weren't. Contact! Jackson spun, firing behind us. I turned and saw shapes in the tunnel flowing along the walls and ceiling like liquid shadow. They'd found us. Of course they'd found us. Keep moving, fighting retreat. We fired as we ran.
The confined space, amplifying the gunshots to painful levels. Cold iron rounds seemed most effective in close quarters. Where they hit, the creatures would dissolve briefly before reforming, but we couldn't kill them, couldn't even slow them down much. The tunnel opened into a larger space, some kind of junction where multiple passages converged. Emergency signs pointed in different directions. Storage, a research level 2. Containment, emergency exit. Containment, Chen read. Containment of what? Of them, Silas said quietly. That's what this place was. Not just an observation post. They were trying to contain the skinwalkers, study them, maybe even weaponize them. That's insane, Patterson breathed. You can't weaponize something like that. They'd turn on you in a heartbeat. But looking at the facility around us, I realized Silas was probably right. All the cameras, the EM detectors, the special ammunition we'd been issued. This wasn't just a research project. This was an attempt to control them. An attempt that had clearly failed catastrophically. Emergency exit. I decided we follow the signs. The tunnel leading to the emergency exit was narrower, older. The concrete here was cracked and stained with water damage. Or maybe not water. The stains were dark and smelled of copper. We passed doors set into the walls. Most were locked, but through windows reinforced with wire mesh, I could see inside. Laboratory spaces, holding cells with heavy steel bars, and in one room, something that made us all stop. It was a wall covered in photographs.
Dozens of them. Pictures of people. Men, women, children, with names and dates written beneath. Above them, in neat block letters, missing persons, 20. They were tracking. Not just near it, Silas corrected, examining the photos more closely. Look at the dates. They cluster every few months. A spike in disappearances, like something was feeding. How many? Patterson asked. Chen counted quickly. Over 100? Maybe more? I felt sick. We'd known the ranch was dangerous. But this was an organized predation pattern spanning years. And the government had known. They documented it, studied it, and done nothing to warn anyone. Why? Jackson asked the question we were all thinking. Why let this continue? Why not evacuate the area? Shut down the ranch? Because they wanted to understand them, I said. Wanted to control them. They sacrificed those people in the name of research. A voice echoed down the tunnel behind us. My voice. And now they've sacrificed you too. Do you understand yet? You were never meant to survive. You're just more data points, more test subjects to see how long humans can last against us. The creature was in the tunnel with us now. I could hear it moving closer, its form scraping against the walls. We ran. The emergency exit tunnel twisted and turned, branching off in multiple directions. We followed the signs when we could see them, made best guesses when we couldn't. Behind us, always behind us, I could hear pursuit. Not just one creature, now many. They'd called more of themselves into the underground, and they were converging on us. There, Chen pointed ahead. A door marked Surface Access 3. That's it. That's the exit. We sprinted the final distance. The door had an emergency bar across it. No lock, designed for quick egress. Jackson slammed into it, and the door flew open. We stumbled out into open air. For a moment, I thought we'd made it. Then I looked around and realized where we were. We'd emerged inside the ranch perimeter, but miles from the main compound. Around us stood tall rock formations, creating an amphitheater, and carved into every surface were symbols, thousands of them, overlapping and interconnected, glowing faintly in the darkness with a light that had nothing to do with the moon. This is their place, Silas said, his voice hollow. This is where they come from, the center of it all. The symbols began to pulse brighter, and from the darkness between the rocks they emerged. Not wearing skins now, not pretending to be anything, just themselves, beings of shadow and hunger and wrongness, taking forms that hurt to perceive. We raised our weapons, but I knew it was pointless. We'd walked right into their home. You wanted to understand us, the creatures said, speaking in unison, their voices echoing off the rocks. Now you will. You will know what it means to wear skin that isn't yours, to exist between forms, to be the absence of meaning. They moved closer, surrounding us. I fired. We all fired, but the rounds passed through them like they were made of smoke. The cold iron, the silver, the white ash, none of it mattered here. This was their place, their power. Last stand, I said quietly to my team. Back to back. If we're going down, we go down fighting. We formed a circle, weapons out, facing the converging darkness. I thought about my family, my grandmother's warnings I'd dismissed, the life I'd never get to live. I thought about failure and sacrifice and the terrible weight of understanding too late. Then Chen said something that changed everything. Wait, look at the symbols. What? I didn't take my eyes off the creatures, but I could hear her excitement in her voice. The symbols, they're a pattern, a language. And I've seen it before in the research files back at the observation post. These marks, they're not what summons them. Chin, now is not the time.
They're a containment field. The symbols are keeping them in, not calling them out. I risked a glance at the nearest rock face. Now that she mentioned it, I could see it. The symbols formed circuits, pathways, boundaries, and they were all focused on this one location.
The ranch isn't their breeding ground. I realize it's their prison. Someone put them here, trapped them here. The indigenous people, Silas said, understanding, flooding his voice. My grandmother's stories. The skinwalkers were real, and the medicine men found a way to contain them. Built this place as a prison. The government bought it, studied it, weakened the barriers, and let them out, I finished. All those disappearances, all those people, they were feeding on whatever came near while they built up strength to break free completely. The creatures had stopped advancing. They were watching us, listening, and for the first time I sensed something from them besides hunger. I sensed fear. They can't leave this place, I said slowly. That's why they've been trying so hard to break us. They need us to destroy the symbols, to break the containment field. That's what they needed CRU-3 for. That's what they need us for. But CRU-3 died, Patterson said. No, Chen corrected, pulling up files on her tablet. Look at the final logs. 3 bodies were never recovered. They're listed as missing, not KIA. The implication hit me like a physical blow. They turned them, made them skinwalkers, sent them out into the world wearing human skin, a perfect infiltration. And they want to do the same to us, Silas finished. Turn us, use us to spread beyond this place. The creatures surged forward suddenly, all pretense gone. They slammed into us with physical force, trying to pin us down, to overwhelm us. I felt claws rake across my armor, felt cold breath on my face, but I also felt something else. Desperation. They were desperate. The symbols, I shouted. Protect the symbols. Don't let them make us damage them. We fought not to escape, not to kill them, but simply to stay away from the carved rocks. Every time they tried to force us toward the walls, we resisted. Every time they tried to push weapons into our hands and aim them at the symbols, we refused. And gradually and possibly, we held them back. The creatures began to retreat, pulling back to the edges of the amphitheater. They were panting now. Could they even pant? Exhausted by the effort to manifest so completely in physical form. Listen to me, I shouted at them. I don't know if you understand, if you can even comprehend, but I'm going to say this anyway. We're not breaking this prison for you. We're not becoming your vessels. You're going to stay here, trapped, until you fade away or until someone finds a way to destroy you permanently. They hissed and howled, but they didn't attack again. They couldn't. They'd expended too much energy trying to force us to free them. There's one way out of here, I said to my team. Chen, can you trace the tunnel system to another exit, one that doesn't bring us back inside their containment? She worked her tablet frantically. Maybe there are multiple surface access points, but they're not all marked clearly. We might end up inside the perimeter again. Then we navigate by the symbols, Silas said. Outside the carved areas, outside the containment, we find our way out step by step. Assuming we don't run into more of them, Jackson added. They're all here, I said, watching the creatures at the edges of the light. They called everything they had to this location. Outside, we'll just be dealing with normal threats. Guards, automated security, maybe some drones, but not them. And when we get out, Patterson asked, when we're beyond the perimeter, what then? Then we tell everyone, I said. We blow the lid off this whole operation. We make sure the world knows what's buried here, what the government tried to study and control. We make sure nobody else ends up like us. They'll discredit us, Chen said.
misclassify everything, call us crazy. Probably, I admitted, but we'll still be alive, and that's more than CRU-3 can say. We moved back toward the emergency exit, weapons trained on the creatures. They watched us go, but didn't follow. As I crossed the threshold back into the tunnel, I took one last look at the symbol-covered amphitheater. This place was a warning, a message from people who'd understood the danger long before any government got involved. And we'd ignored it, poked it, tried to exploit it for military advantage. Now, we were paying the price. The tunnel branched multiple times, and we followed Chen's best guesses, moving away from the containment area. Sometimes we heard sounds in the darkness, whispers, movement, breathing, but nothing attacked us. The creatures were bound to their prison, and we were moving beyond their reach. After what felt like hours, we found another surface access door. This one opened onto empty desert, miles from the ranch proper. In the distance, I could see the lights of the military cordon. "We made it," Patterson said, disbelief in his voice. "We actually made it out." "Not yet," I said. "We still have to get through the cordon. And when we do, we need to make sure our story is heard." We started walking, leaving the ranch behind us, heading toward the military lights and whatever came next. Behind us, back in their prison, the skinwalkers howled. The sound carried across the desert, a warning and a promise. They were trapped, but they were patient. They'd been trapped before and eventually gotten out. They would wait, they would plan, and someday someone would make the mistake of freeing them again. Unless we stopped it. That was the new mission, I realized. Not containment, not study, but exposure, truth, making sure the world knew what lurked in that place and why it could never, ever be allowed to escape. As we walked through the night, I made a silent promise to CRU-3, to the 100-plus people who disappeared near the ranch, to everyone who'd been sacrificed in the name of classified research. We would survive. We would tell the story, and we would make sure it never happened again. The military cordon spotted us when we were half a mile out. Lights blazed, and armed soldiers moved to intercept us. We dropped our weapons, raised our hands, and prepared to face questions we couldn't fully answer. But we were alive. Against all odds, we'd survived the Skinwalker Ranch. Now came the harder part, making sure everyone believed us. The military escort came in hard. 3 Humvees, a full squad of armed soldiers, all with weapons trained on us as we approached. Through the glare of spotlights, I could make out hazmat suits on some of the personnel. They weren't taking any chances. "Halt! On the ground! Hands behind your heads!"
We complied immediately. I pressed my cheek against the cold desert sand, feeling Jackson next to me, hearing Patterson's ragged breathing on my other side. Rough hands patted us down, removed our remaining weapons, zip-tied our wrists behind our backs. "Clear," someone shouted. "Temperature scans." They ran handheld devices over us, checking for what? Elevated body temperature? Electromagnetic anomalies? Some sign we'd been compromised? "Normal readings across the board, sir. Get them in isolation. Separate vehicles, no communication." They hauled us to our feet and split us up. I was pushed into the back of a Humvee, a bag thrown over my head. The vehicle lurched into motion, and I was left in darkness with only my thoughts. The drive lasted an hour, maybe more. When the bag finally came off, I was in a concrete room with a single metal table and 2 chairs. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A mirror dominated one wall, obviously one-way glass. I sat there for what might have been 3 hours before anyone came. When the door finally opened, it wasn't Colonel Hittrix. It was someone else. A civilian in an expensive suit carrying a leather briefcase. "Captain," he said,
taking the seat across from me. No introduction, no name. We need to discuss what happened at the ranch. Then uncuff me, I said. In time. First, tell me what you saw. You already know what I saw. You sent us there. You've been studying that place for years. You know exactly what's down there. He smiled, cold and professional. I'm not interested in what I know. I'm interested in what you think you know. There's a difference. Are my people safe? They're being debriefed, just like you. Now tell me about the creatures. I looked at him for a long moment, weighing my options. Then I started talking. I told him everything. The skinwalkers, the containment symbols, the merged entity, the underground facility, the missing persons, all of it. He listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he sat back and steepled his fingers. That's quite a story, he said. Unfortunately, it contradicts the official record. What official record? The record that shows CRU-4 deployed to the ranch encountered environmental hazards, including gas leaks and structural failures, and successfully evacuated after minimal contact with wildlife in the area. The record that shows you all passed your psychological evaluations and medical exams. The record that shows no anomalous activity whatsoever. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened, Captain. Unless you'd like to tell a different story, one involving hallucinations brought on by carbon monoxide poisoning, perhaps some experimental compound that affected your perception. He leaned forward. Or we could acknowledge that you and your team suffered a psychological break due to the stress of the deployment. PTSD. Very understandable, very treatable. Medical discharge with full honors and benefits. I understood then. They were offering me a deal. Keep quiet, accept their version of events, and walk away with my life and career intact. Or tell the truth and be branded unstable, discredited, possibly worse. What about CRU-3? I asked quietly. What's the official story there? Training accident? Tragic, but these things happen in classified programs. And the missing persons? The 100+ people who disappeared? Separate cases, unrelated. Some solved, some still open. Nothing to do with the ranch. You're going to bury it. There's nothing to bury, Captain. Just an unfortunate series of accidents and some stressed soldiers who need help processing what they experienced. He slid a piece of paper across the table. A non-disclosure agreement. Pages of legalese that boiled down to sign this or face consequences. Your team has already signed, he said. Chen, Jackson, Patterson. All agreed to the official version. Only 2 left. He pulled out another document. Martinez signed an hour ago. You're the last one. I looked at the papers. At this man's expectant face. At my reflection in the one-way mirror. I thought about what we'd seen. About the truth. About the danger still locked away in that desert prison. About the fact that if I refused to sign, if I went public, they'd destroy my credibility so thoroughly that nobody would believe me anyway. I thought about Silas signing. Silas, who'd lost his sister and knew the cost of fighting battles you couldn't win. If he'd signed, it meant he'd found a different way to fight. A smarter way. I need guarantees, I said. You're not in a position to negotiate. Yes, I am, because if you had enough leverage to force this, you'd have done it already. You need my voluntary cooperation, so I need guarantees. He studied me for a moment, then nodded slightly. What do you want? Full medical benefits for my team. Real treatment, not just a cover story. We've been through trauma, and we deserve proper care. Agreed. Monitoring of the ranch site. I want regular reports that the containment is holding. I don't need to see them,
I just need to know someone trustworthy is checking. He hesitated. I can arrange for quarterly status reports to be forwarded to a secure location you can access. Coded updates only. And if the containment fails, if there's a breach, then you'll be contacted immediately, assuming you're available for consultation. Consultation, not deployment. Consultation, he confirmed. We won't send you back there. I picked up the pen. One more thing. The 3 members of CRU-3 who disappeared, the ones who weren't found, they're out there somewhere, walking in human skin. That's speculation. It's a security risk.
They need to be found and contained. Already being handled. We have protocols for that scenario. I didn't believe him, but I also knew this was the best I'd get. I signed the document, each page feeling heavier than the last. "Smart choice, Captain," the man said, collecting the papers. "Your team is being transported to a secure medical facility in Colorado. You'll spend 2 weeks in observation and debriefing, then return to regular duty at a post of your choosing. This incident will not appear on your service record. And if I talk, if any of us talk, then you'll be discredited quickly and quietly. But I don't think you will." He stood, gathering his briefcase. "You understand the stakes now. You understand what's at risk if the wrong people find out what's locked away in that place. Sometimes the truth is too dangerous to tell." He left me alone in the room. Eventually, other personnel came, removed the handcuffs, gave me water and a meal. Then I was transported to the facility in Colorado, just like he'd promised. 3 months later, the medical facility was actually decent. Real counseling, not just a cover story. They assigned us to a group session. All 5 members of CRU-4 meeting 3 times a week with a cleared therapist who claimed to believe our official story, but whose eyes said she knew better. We never talked about the ranch directly, but we talked around it. About fear, about loss, about the weight of carrying secrets that could destroy you if you weren't careful. Silas took me aside after one session, his expression serious. "They contacted me last week." "Who?" "The man in the suit. He sent me the first quarterly report. Just a code phrase confirming the containment is holding." "That's good." "Is it?" Silas looked out the window at the Rocky Mountains in the distance. "Sometimes I wonder if we made the right choice, signing those papers, keeping quiet. What else could we do?" I asked. "Go public? Get labeled crazy while the ranch continues operating in secret? At least this way we have some oversight. Some guarantee we'll know if things go wrong. And if they do go wrong? If the containment fails? What then?" I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I thought about the ranch every day, every night. I dreamed about those carved symbols, about creatures wearing stolen skin, and about the desperate hunger in their eyes when they'd realized we wouldn't free them. Chen coped by staying busy. She'd requested assignment to cybersecurity and spent her days monitoring classified networks, supposedly hunting for external threats. But I knew she was also watching for any chatter about the ranch, any sign that the containment might be compromised. Jackson had gone back to demolitions training, but he'd made me a promise. If we ever got the call that the containment had failed, he'd have enough ordnance ready to bury that entire valley under a mountain of rubble. Patterson struggled the most. The creatures had gotten into his head deeper than the rest of us, shown him things he couldn't shake. But slowly, with help, he was finding his way back. And me? I was assigned to Fort Benning, training new soldiers in advanced tactics. Sometimes during late-night briefings, I wanted to tell them the truth. Wanted to warn them that not all threats come from human enemies, that there are things out there in the dark places, things that wear our faces and read our minds and feed on our fear. But I stayed silent. I followed orders and kept the secret. 6 months after the incident, the call came at 3 a.m. I answered my phone to find an automated voice. Consultation requested. Status yellow. Confirm receipt. My blood went cold. Yellow meant increased activity. Not a breach, but something was wrong. Confirmed, I said into the phone. 20 minutes later, a detailed report appeared in my secure email. The containment symbols were deteriorating. Something, whether time or deliberate action, was causing them to fade. The creatures were still trapped, but the prison was weakening. I called Silas immediately. You got it too? Yeah. What do? We do what we're supposed to. We consult. I wrote a detailed response outlining everything I knew about the symbols, recommending that experts in indigenous culture and linguistics be brought in to restore the carvings. I suggested increasing the military presence, not to engage the creatures, but to ensure no one accidentally damaged the remaining symbols. I sent the report and waited. Days passed, then weeks, no response. Finally, another email arrived. Recommendations received. Action being taken. Status remains yellow. That was it. No details, no confirmation. They were actually following my advice. Just a bureaucratic brush-off. They're not going to fix it, Chen said when we all met up against regulations at a bar in Denver. They're going to let it deteriorate. Maybe they think they can control the partial breach, study the creatures under less confined conditions. Or maybe they're just incompetent, Jackson suggested. Never attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity. Either way, I said we need a backup plan, because if that containment fails completely, if those things get out, we all knew what would happen. The creatures would spread, they'd feed, they'd create more of themselves, and within months, maybe weeks, they'd be everywhere. So what's the plan? Patterson asked. We go public, Silas said quietly. Not now, not yet, but we prepare. We document everything we remember. We find allies, other soldiers, civilians, anyone who's encountered something like this. We build a network of people who know the truth. And if the containment fails, if they get out, we don't wait for official channels. We sound the alarm ourselves. They'll destroy us, Chen said. Our careers, our reputations, maybe our lives. Maybe, I agreed. But what's the alternative? Let those things spread because we're too scared to speak up? We made a pact that night to watch, to wait, to prepare, and if the time came, to tell the truth, regardless of the consequences. 1 year after the incident, the second call came when I was teaching a tactics class. The same automated voice. Consultation requested. Status red. Immediate response required. Status red. Breach. I dismissed the class and ran to my office. The secure email had already arrived. The message was brief. Containment failure. Sector 7. 3 entities unaccounted for. Request immediate consultation, team assembly, transport inbound. They were actually calling us back. I made the calls. Silas in Virginia, Chen in Texas, Jackson in California, Patterson in Alaska. Within hours, we were all on planes heading to the same classified location. We met at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, the same place we deployed from a year earlier. But this time, Colonel Hendricks wasn't there to brief us. Instead, it was a woman in a General Stars who I didn't recognize. "Thank you for coming," she said, her tone making it clear this wasn't optional. Okay, a section of the containment field at the ranch failed. We lost contact with 2 monitoring teams. When reinforcements arrived, they found signs of struggle, but no bodies. "The creatures got out," I said. "3 of them?" "Yes, we've tracked their movement south and east. They're staying away from populated areas so far, but that won't last. We need them contained or eliminated before they reach civilian populations." "You want us to hunt them," Silas said. "You're the only team that's encountered them and survived. You understand how they operate, and based on your previous reports, you know their weaknesses." "We also reported that we couldn't kill them," Chen reminded her. "Our weapons barely slowed them down." "We've developed new countermeasures," the general said, based on further study of the containment symbols in consultation with outside experts. "We believe we now have weapons that can permanently neutralize them." "Permanently?" Jackson asked. "As in destroy them? End them?" "Yes." I exchanged glances with my team. This was it, the moment we'd been preparing for, not to keep the secret anymore, but to actually do something about the threat. "What kind of weapons are we talking about?" I asked. The general gestured to a door at the back of the briefing room. "Better to show you." We followed her into an armory like nothing I'd ever seen. Weapons lined the walls, but these weren't standard military issue. They were ceremonial blades etched with symbols matching those we'd seen at the ranch. Compound bows with arrows tipped in what looked like obsidian, and most unusual of all, what appeared to be modified flamethrowers. "The blades are forged using traditional methods," the general explained, "blessed and consecrated according to Navajo protocols. The arrows are genuine ceremonial points, authenticated as precont, and the flame units use a compound derived from white sage and other indigenous materials." "You're using their own magic against them," Silas said, a note of respect in his voice. "We're using principles we don't fully understand," the general corrected. "But yes, essentially, field tests suggest these weapons can permanently disrupt their form, prevent reformation." "Field tests?" Patterson asked. "You mean you've already?" "We captured one of the entities that escaped. It's currently contained in a specialized facility. The weapons proved effective in neutralizing it." She said it so clinically, like she was discussing the destruction of equipment rather than the ending of a being that had existed for potentially centuries. But I couldn't muster sympathy for the skinwalkers. Not after what I'd seen them do. "When do we deploy?" I asked. "You'll leave in 2 hours. You'll be inserted via helicopter into the surge zone. Rules of engagement are simple. Locate and eliminate the targets by any means necessary. Capture is not an option. These things cannot be contained indefinitely." "What about the ranch itself?" Chen asked. "The main containment. If 3 got out..." "The breach has been sealed and reinforced. We brought in specialists to restore the damaged sections. The remaining entities are still trapped." "For how long?" The general's expression didn't change. "That's above your pay grade, Corporal." We flew out that night in a Black Hawk, heading into the desert southeast from the ranch. The creatures had been tracked moving through uninhabited areas, but they were getting closer to small towns, closer to people who had no idea what was coming. "How do we even find them?" Patterson asked over the headset. "They can look like anything, be anything." "The EM detectors," I said, holding up the upgraded version they'd issued us. "They can't hide their electromagnetic signature, and these new models have better range." "And if they split up?" Jackson asked. 3 of them, 5 of us? What if they attack simultaneously from different directions?" "Then we work in pairs and stay mobile," I said. "Silas, you're with me. Chen and Patterson together. Jackson, you're our scout. Use the drones to track movement." Jackson nodded, already prepping his drone equipment. The small quadcopters were equipped with thermal imaging and EM sensors. If the creatures were out there, we'd find them. The helicopter dropped us in a canyon system 30 miles from the nearest town. Red rock formations towered around us, creating shadows even in the moonlight. It reminded me too much of the ranch. "Remember," I said as we geared up, "these things are smart. They'll try to separate us, get into our heads. Trust your equipment more than your eyes. Trust your teammates more than your instincts." "And if they're wearing someone we know?" Patterson asked quietly. "Then we remember that the person we knew is already dead. We're not killing them, we're just putting down the thing wearing their face." We moved out in formation, Jackson's drones flying ahead. The EM detectors remained quiet for the first hour, registering only background radiation. Then, as we rounded a bend in the canyon, all 3 devices started chirping simultaneously. "Contact," Jackson whispered. "Multiple signals. They're close." "How close?" 50 yards? Maybe less." "There. Wait." He checked his drone feed. "They're not moving. They're just sitting there, all 3 of them." "It's a trap," Silas said immediately. "Of course it's a trap," I agreed. "Question is, what kind?" We approached cautiously, weapons ready. The canyon opened into a wider area where a small stream trickled between rocks. And there, sitting calmly on the boulders, were 3 figures. They wore human faces, perfect human faces. A man, a woman, and a child. They looked like a normal family having a picnic in the desert, with a cooler and blankets. "Hello," the man said in a friendly voice. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" "Don't respond," I muttered to my team. "Chen, confirm readings." She checked her detector. "EM signatures are off the scale. Those are definitely them." "We know why you're here," the woman said, standing up. Her movements were too smooth, too fluid. "You've been sent to kill us, just like you killed our sibling." "They told you about that?" I asked, unable to help myself. "We felt its die," the child said. Its voice was high and innocent and completely wrong. "We felt its essence scatter. They found a way to end us." "Good," Jackson said, raising his modified flamethrower. "Then this should be quick." "Wait," the man held up a hand. "We have a proposition." "I'm not interested." "We can give you names," the woman interrupted. "The 3 from CRU-3, the ones who were turned, the ones walking around in human skin spreading our influence. We know where they are." I felt my blood run cold. "You're lying." "We're not. They're our children now, our extensions. We know every thought, every movement. Let us go and we'll tell you exactly where to find them." "Why would you do that?" Chen demanded. "Because we're dying anyway," the child said matter-of-factly. "The containment at the ranch is being restored. We felt that too. Our time in this world is ending. But our children can survive, can spread, can ensure our legacy continues. Unless you hunt them down too," the man finished, "which you will eventually. But by then, how many more will they have created? How far will the infection have spread?" It was a devil's bargain. Let 3 creatures go free in exchange for information that could stop a larger outbreak, or destroy these 3 and spend years hunting down the turned soldiers, never knowing how many people they might infect in the meantime.
"We don't negotiate with," I started. "Think about it," the woman said. 3 of us here in the wilderness, far from people, or 3 transformed humans in populated areas, hiding in plain sight. Which is the greater threat? "They're playing us," Silas said, trying to confuse us. "Are we the child?" asked. "Or are we offering you the strategic choice, the tactical advantage? Isn't that what you're trained to recognize?" I looked at my team. Patterson was shaking his head. Jackson's finger was on the trigger, ready to fire. Chen was calculating. I could see it in her eyes. And Silas. "It's a lie," Silas said flatly. "They're not dying, they're not giving up, they're trying to survive, that's all this is." The 3 figures smiled simultaneously. "Smart boy, very smart." "But we weren't lying about the locations. We do know where our children are, and we'll tell you anyway, because it doesn't matter." "Why doesn't it matter?" I asked. "Because they've already made more," the man said. "The 3 became 6, the 6 became 12, and even if you hunt them all down, there will always be more. We are patient. We are inevitable. Tonight you might kill us, but tomorrow, next month, next year, eventually we will be free. Then we better make sure tonight counts, Jackson said. He opened fire. The White Sage compound ignited, flames shooting out in a stream that engulfed all three figures. They screamed, not with the inhuman howling I expected, but with the voices of real people, real victims crying out in pain and terror. I wanted to look away. Part of me still wonders if we did the right thing. But we'd made our choice. We'd chosen to fight, to protect the people who had no idea what threatened them. The flames burned bright and clean, fed by compounds we didn't fully understand. The three figures writhed, their forms breaking apart, revealing the darkness beneath. Unlike before, this time they didn't reform. The flames ate at their essence itself, consuming them completely. When the fire finally died, nothing remained but ash and silence. "It worked," Patterson breathed. "They're really gone." "3 down," Chen said. "Unknown number left to go." We collected samples of the ash. Evidence, though. Who would believe it? I didn't know. Then we called for extraction. As we waited for the helicopter, I couldn't shake the creature's final words about the infection spreading, about their patience, about their inevitability. "Silas," I said quietly, "when we get back, we're telling everything. No more secrets, no more classified briefings. We write it all down. We send it to journalists. We make sure the world knows." "They'll deny it," he said. "They'll call us crazy." "Let them. At least then people will have a chance to decide for themselves, to be vigilant, to watch for the signs." He nodded slowly. "All right. We do it together, all 5 of us. They can't silence all of us at once." The helicopter arrived, and we boarded in silence. As we flew back through the night, I looked out at the desert below. Somewhere down there, former soldiers walked around in human skin, spreading an infection older than our civilization. And tomorrow, we would break every rule we'd agreed to. We would expose the secret, face the consequences, and hope that sunlight would prove the best disinfectant. But tonight, we'd proven one thing. The skinwalkers could be killed. The darkness could be fought. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be clean, and it might cost us everything. But we would fight anyway, because that's what soldiers do. You're reading this, which means we succeeded. Maybe you believe us, maybe you don't. Maybe you think this is fiction, a horror story designed to entertain rather than warn. That's fine, we expected that. But keep this in mind. If you're ever in the desert Southwest, and you see someone whose shadow moves wrong, whose eyes reflect light like an animal's, whose voice sounds just a bit off, mimicking someone you know with uncanny accuracy, don't approach them. Don't engage them. Don't invite them into your home or your life. Just walk away. Because the Skinwalker Ranch isn't the only place they were imprisoned. It's not the only breach that's occurred. And the 3 turned soldiers we were told about, we found 7 so far, but we're still looking. And if you ever encounter something that seems wrong, that makes your skin crawl for reasons you can't explain, that reads your thoughts and wears familiar faces like masks, remember what I'm about to tell you. Remember it exactly. Don't trust your eyes. Trust your instincts. Don't listen to what they say. Listen to what they don't say. Don't try to fight them alone. Find others who know the truth. And above all, don't let them convince you that they're myths, that they're legends, that they're anything other than real. Because they are real, and they're still out there hunting. My family and I had been planning this camping trip for months. It was going to be our big summer vacation in 2017. A week spent in nature, sleeping in our camper and enjoying the outdoors. My wife Joyce and I have 2 kids, a 12-year-old son named Tyler and a 9-year-old daughter named Amy. The kids had been counting down the days for this trip, circling the date on our kitchen calendar and pestering us daily about what to pack.
It had been nearly 5 years since our last camping vacation, and we were all desperate for a break from the grinding monotony of daily life. The endless cycle of work, school, homework, and household chores had left us feeling drained and disconnected from each other. We packed up the camper on Friday night, loading it with sleeping bags, camp chairs, coolers full of food, fishing rods, bikes, board games, and enough supplies to keep us comfortable for a week. Tyler insisted on bringing his new flashlight, an industrial-strength model he'd bought with his birthday money. Amy packed her stuffed rabbit and a collection of nature guidebooks she'd checked out from the library. We hit the road early Saturday morning, just as the sun was beginning to paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. Our destination was a campground about 4 hours from home, nestled deep in the Appalachian foothills. We'd stayed there twice before, several years ago, and remembered it fondly. The campground featured a pristine lake for swimming and fishing, miles of hiking trails winding through old-growth forest, and a sense of peaceful isolation while still maintaining basic amenities like running water and clean restrooms. The drive took us through small towns that seemed frozen in time, past farms with weathered barns and grazing cattle, and eventually into increasingly dense woodland.
The entrance was marked by a rustic wooden sign, the letters carved deep and darkened with age. A narrow gravel road wound through towering pines and oaks, their branches forming a canopy overhead that filtered the sunlight into dancing patterns. We checked in at the small office with an elderly man with sun-leathered skin barely looked up from his newspaper as he took our information and handed over a map. The campground was only about a quarter full, he mentioned, so we'd have plenty of privacy. Perfect, I thought. Finding our designated campsite took some navigation through the winding roads, but when we finally pulled in, I felt immediately satisfied with our spot. It sat on a slight elevation, surrounded by thick undergrowth and massive trees that had probably been growing for a century or more. The nearest neighboring campsite was visible through the trees about 50 yards away, where a young family was setting up their tent. We worked together to level the camper, extend the awnings, and arrange our outdoor setup. Joyce organized our makeshift kitchen on the picnic table while I connected the water and electrical hookups. The kids, unable to contain their excitement any longer, grabbed their bikes and took off down the gravel road to explore, their laughter echoing back to us through the trees. "Don't go too far," Joyce called after them, but they were already disappearing around a bend. I set up our camp chairs around the designated fire ring and began gathering kindling from the surrounding forest floor. The woods here felt ancient and undisturbed. Moss covered the northern sides of tree trunks, and the undergrowth was thick with ferns and wild berries. The air smelled rich and earthy, a combination of decaying leaves, pine sap, and damp soil. By the time the kids returned from their explorations, breathless and rosy-cheeked, I had a decent fire crackling. Tyler reported that they'd found the lake, the bathhouse, and another playground area near the main office. Amy had collected a handful of interesting rocks and pine cones, which she arranged carefully on the picnic table like treasures. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I fired up our portable grill and cooked burgers while Joyce prepared all the fixings. The smell of grilling meat mingled with wood smoke, and my stomach growled in anticipation. This was exactly what we needed: simple pleasures, fresh air, and quality time together. We ate dinner as darkness crept through the forest, slowly swallowing the light. The fire provided our illumination, casting flickering shadows that danced across our faces. Tyler told elaborate stories about monsters in the woods, trying to scare his sister until Joyce told him to stop.
Amy retaliated by threatening to hide his flashlight, and their bickering made us all laugh. After dinner, we roasted marshmallows, the kids competing to achieve perfect golden brown exteriors without letting them catch fire. The dark woods surrounding our campsite felt peaceful and protective, like a natural barrier between us and the rest of the world. I could hear the occasional call of an owl, the chirping of countless crickets, and the gentle crackling of our fire. It was perfect. The next morning, I awoke to golden sunlight streaming through the camper windows and the sound of birds singing their dawn chorus. I felt more rested than I had in months, despite sleeping on the camper's narrow bed. Joyce was already awake, pulling on her hiking boots and trying not to wake the kids. "Coffee?" she whispered, and I nodded gratefully. We sat outside in the cool morning air, sipping coffee from our metal camp cups and watching mist rise from the ground. The temperature would climb as the day progressed, but for now it was pleasantly cool. Tyler emerged first, his hair sticking up in every direction, followed shortly by Amy, who immediately wanted to know what we were having for breakfast. After a quick meal of scrambled eggs and toast cooked over the camp stove, we gathered our fishing gear and walked down to the lake. The path wound through the forest for about 10 minutes, gradually descending. Morning light filtered through the canopy, creating shafts of brightness that illuminated floating dust particles and gave the woods an almost ethereal quality. The lake spread before us, mirror smooth and reflecting the surrounding trees perfectly. Not another soul was in sight. We claimed a small sandy beach area, and I helped the kids bait their hooks with worms we dug up near our campsite. Joyce and I cast our lines further out, hoping for bass or maybe a catfish. The kids' enthusiasm for fishing lasted about 20 minutes before they abandoned their rods and began playing in the shallow water near shore, splashing and searching for interesting rocks. Their laughter carried across the water, and I found myself smiling as Joyce and I continued casting, enjoying the tranquil morning, even though we caught nothing. "Maybe they're not biting because the kids are making too much noise," Joyce suggested. But neither of us really cared. This wasn't about catching fish. It was about being together, away from screens and schedules and stress. When we returned to our campsite around midday, we decided it was the perfect time for a hike. The temperature had risen but wasn't unbearable yet, and we had several hours before we'd need to think about dinner. There were multiple trails branching off from various points in the campground, and after consulting our map, we chose one marked as moderate difficulty, with a description promising scenic views and interesting wildlife. The forest here was magnificent. Towering hardwoods created a cathedral-like atmosphere, their branches interweaving overhead.
The trail was well maintained, but clearly not heavily trafficked. Tyler led the way, walking with the confidence of a preteen, trying to prove his maturity, while Amy walked beside Joyce, stopping frequently to examine wildflowers or interesting insects. I brought up the rear, camera in hand, trying to capture the beauty around us. The deeper we hiked into the woods, the quieter it became. The sounds of the campground faded away completely, replaced by the rustle of leaves, the occasional snap of a twig under our feet, and the distant calls of birds I couldn't identify. About halfway through what we estimated would be a 3-hour loop, we came across something unexpected. An old abandoned cabin sitting about 30 yards off the trail. It was barely visible through the undergrowth at first, but Tyler spotted it and insisted we investigate. As we approached, I felt a strange sense of unease settling over me. The cabin was small, maybe just 1 or 2 rooms, constructed from rough-hewn logs that had darkened and weathered over decades of exposure.
The roof had partially caved in, revealing rotted support beams and missing shingles. One window hung open at an odd angle, the glass long since shattered. A crumbling stone chimney leaned precariously, looking like it might collapse at any moment. "Can we go inside?" Amy asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "It's not safe. The floor could give way or the rest of the roof could collapse." The cabin unsettled me in a way I couldn't quite articulate. There was something wrong about it, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The windows looked like empty eye sockets, and the gaping doorway resembled a mouth frozen in a silent scream. Vines had grown over parts of the structure, giving it the appearance of being slowly consumed by the forest itself. We paused there to have a snack, granola bars and water, and I tried to shake off the creeping feeling of being watched. Joyce seemed to sense my discomfort and suggested we keep moving. I felt genuine relief when we continued down the trail and the cabin disappeared from view behind us. The rest of the hike was uneventful and beautiful. We emerged from the forest trail near a different section of the campground and walked the road back to our site, tired but happy. The afternoon passed quickly in a pleasant blur of swimming, napping in the camper, and playing card games in the shade of our awning. As evening approached, I started preparing dinner while Joyce helped the kids change out of their damp swimsuits. I had just gotten the charcoal going when I noticed something odd. The forest had become completely silent. The constant background noise of crickets, birds, and rustling wildlife had abruptly ceased, as though someone had flipped a switch. I paused, hot dog package in hand, and listened intently. Nothing. Just an eerie, oppressive silence that seemed to press against my eardrums. Even the breeze that had been gently swaying the tree branches had died away, leaving the air completely still. "Dad, it's really quiet out here," Tyler said, emerging from the camper and looking around uneasily. "Where did all the sounds go?" "I don't know, buddy," I admitted, scanning the tree line. "Maybe the animals are bedding down for the night." But that didn't make sense. If anything, dusk should be the time when forest sounds increased, not disappeared. The silence felt unnatural, almost threatening. I noticed the family at the neighboring campsite had also paused in their activities, standing still and looking around with confused expressions. Joyce joined us outside, and I saw concern flicker across her face as she too registered the unnatural quiet. "That's strange," she said softly, moving closer to me. We ate our dinner of hot dogs and beans, but the usual laughter and conversation felt forced, subdued by the oppressive silence surrounding us. As darkness crept through the campground, I built up the fire higher than necessary, wanting the light and warmth. The flames provided some comfort, but the dancing shadows they cast seemed to reach far into the woods, creating an illusion of movement where there should be none. Amy sat pressed against Joyce's side, her earlier enthusiasm completely dampened. Tyler tried to maintain his brave front, but I could see his eyes darting toward the dark tree line every few seconds. We were all feeling it. Something was wrong, though none of us could identify exactly what. As the last light faded from the sky and true darkness enveloped our campsite, that's when we heard it. A scream that shattered the oppressive silence like glass breaking. It came from somewhere deep in the woods, high-pitched and agonized, lasting for several seconds before cutting off abruptly. Amy shrieked and buried her face in Joyce's shoulder. Tyler jumped up from his chair, his face pale in the firelight. "What was that?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "I don't know," I said, standing up and peering into the darkness beyond our fire's reach. My heart was pounding, adrenaline flooding my system. Maybe an animal caught by a predator. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. That scream had sounded distinctly human, or at least close enough to human to trigger every primitive alarm bell in my brain. Joyce met my eyes over the kids' heads, and I could see my own fear reflected back at me. The scream came again, louder this time, closer, blood-curdling in its intensity. It echoed through the trees, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. The kids grabbed onto us, and I felt Amy trembling against my leg. "Inside the camper," I commanded, using a tone that left no room for argument. "Everyone inside the camper now." We scrambled into the camper, and I locked the door behind us, checking it twice to make sure it was secure. My hands were shaking. We huddled in the back sleeping area, Tyler and Amy, between Joyce and me. The thin walls of the camper suddenly seemed woefully inadequate protection against whatever was out there in those dark woods. The screaming continued intermittently for what felt like hours, but was probably only about 30 minutes. Sometimes it seemed to move through the forest, circling our campsite. Other times it sounded like it was coming from directly behind our camper. So close I expected to see something peering through our windows. Between the screams, we could hear other sounds: branches snapping, heavy footsteps crunching through the underbrush, and occasionally what sounded like labored breathing or snorting. Tyler clutched his flashlight like a weapon. Amy cried quietly into her stuffed rabbit. Joyce held both children close, whispering reassurances that we were safe, though her voice shook with fear. I positioned myself near the door, armed with nothing more substantial than a tire iron I'd grabbed from under the driver's seat. If something tried to get in, I'd defend my family with everything I had. The fire outside had died down to glowing embers, providing almost no light. The darkness pressed against our windows like something alive. Eventually, the screaming stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise had been. We waited, barely breathing, listening for any indication of what was happening outside, but there was nothing. Just that same unnatural silence that had preceded the terror. None of us slept that night. We took turns dozing fitfully while others kept watch, jumping at every small sound. When morning light finally began to seep through the windows, painting everything in shades of gray before blooming into color, I felt weak with relief. We'd survived the night. Over a breakfast of cold cereal, none of us had the energy or desire to cook. We'd discussed our options. The smart thing would be to pack up and leave immediately, but the kids, perhaps driven by some mixture of curiosity and stubbornness, begged us to stay one more night. "Please, Dad," Tyler said. "It was probably just an animal, maybe a mountain lion or something."
"They're not going to attack us. We promised we could stay the whole week," Amy added, her eyes red from crying, but determined. Joyce and I exchanged a long look. Every instinct I had screamed that we should leave, that staying was foolish and dangerous. But in the bright morning light, with birds singing again and the forest appearing completely normal, our terror from the night before seemed almost silly. Maybe it had been an animal. Maybe we'd overreacted. "One more night," I finally agreed. "But we leave first thing tomorrow morning. No arguments, and nobody wanders off alone today. We stay together and close to the campsite." The family that had been camping near us had apparently decided differently. Their site was empty, their tents and vehicle gone. They must have packed up and left during the night, when they too heard the screaming. Part of me wished we'd done the same. We spent that day in a tight cluster, never straying far from our camper. I kept getting an uncomfortable sensation of being observed from the woods, though every time I turned to look, there was nothing there, just trees and shadows and the occasional rustle of leaves that could have been wind or could have been something else entirely. The hours crawled by. We played cards, we read books, we talked about anything except what had happened the night before. But the fear was there, hovering around us like a fog. As the sun began its descent, my anxiety ratcheted up with each passing minute. I didn't want to face another night here, trapped in our camper while something circled outside.
As the sky began to darken, I noticed storm clouds gathering on the horizon, massive, roiling formations that promised a significant weather event. The wind picked up, bending the trees and sending leaves swirling through our campsite. Thunder rumbled in the distance, deep and ominous. "Storm's coming," Joyce said, unnecessarily. "We should get everything secured and get inside." We rushed to bring in chairs, secure the awning, and lock down anything that might blow away. The storm approached with frightening speed, the temperature dropping noticeably. Lightning began flashing on the horizon, great sheets of light that illuminated the underbellies of the clouds. Thunder followed, growing steadily louder. We ate a hurried dinner of sandwiches and retreated into the camper just as the first fat drops of rain began to fall. Within minutes, it became a deluge, water hammering against the metal roof with deafening intensity. The wind howled, rocking the camper slightly on its stabilizers. Lightning flashed continuously now, and thunder crashed so loudly I felt it in my chest. The storm quickly became the least of our concerns. Over the torrential downpour and booming thunder, a new sound emerged from the woods. That same terrible moaning we'd heard the night before, but amplified, more urgent. It was accompanied by the unmistakable sounds of something large crashing through the underbrush, breaking branches, moving with purpose toward our campsite. Amy started crying again, and Tyler's face had gone white. Joyce pulled both children close while I stood near the door, that tire iron gripped tightly in my sweating hands. My mouth had gone dry. Whatever was out there was getting closer, and there was nowhere for us to run. "What is it?" Amy whimpered through her tears. "What's out there?" "I don't know, sweetie," Joyce replied, her voice barely steady. "But your father and I will keep you safe, I promise." The moaning grew louder, closer, until it seemed to be right outside our camper. I could hear heavy breathing, snorting, the sound of something moving around the perimeter of our site. Then it stopped, and in that moment of silence, I was certain we were about to be attacked. Suddenly, a blinding white light flooded through our windows, and a bullhorn squealed, cutting through the storm. "Come out with your hands up! This is the police!" I nearly collapsed with relief, fumbling with the lock. I opened the door to find two police officers in rain gear, their flashlights and vehicle spotlights illuminating our campsite. Their hands rested on their holstered weapons, and they were scanning the tree line tensely. "There's a dangerous animal loose in these woods," one of them explained quickly, rain streaming down his face. "We've been tracking it for 2 days. You need to pack up immediately so we can escort you out of here. It's not safe." We didn't need to be told twice. Moving faster than I thought possible, we threw our belongings into the camper with no regard for organization. The officers kept their lights trained on the woods, and I could see the tension in their postures. Whatever they were tracking, they were genuinely afraid of it. Within 20 minutes, we had everything packed. As we pulled out of the campsite, following the police cruiser down the winding road toward the exit, I looked back one last time. In the flash of lightning, I thought I saw something massive moving between the trees, but then it was gone, swallowed by darkness and distance. The kids fell asleep within minutes, exhausted by fear and adrenaline crash. Joyce and I drove in silence for nearly an hour before either of us spoke. "Next year," Joyce finally said, I say we just go to the beach. Agreed, I replied, my hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel. Absolutely agreed. We never did return to those woods. To this day, I wonder what kind of animal the police were tracking. They never told us, and when I tried to follow up later, I was told the situation had been resolved and no further information could be released. But I know what I heard, what we all heard. And sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I remember that abandoned cabin and those screams, and I think about how some questions are better left unanswered. God knows I'm grateful we made it out of there safely. Whatever lurks in those deep woods, I pray no other family has to encounter it the way we did. Some places are wild for a reason, and some darkness should remain undisturbed. Let me tell you about myself first, because understanding who I am makes what happened at Gettysburg all the more real. I've been obsessed with the American Civil War for as long as I can remember. While other kids my age were collecting baseball cards or playing video games, I spent hours poring over battlefield maps, reading first-hand accounts from soldiers, and watching every documentary I could find. There was something about that particular conflict that gripped me. Maybe it was the tragedy of a nation torn apart, or perhaps the individual stories of courage and horror that emerged from those blood-soaked fields. When I turned 12, I managed to convince my parents to let me join a reenactment group. They were hesitant at first. My mother worried about me handling reproduction rifles, even if they only fired blanks. My father thought I should focus on modern sports, but I wore them down with my persistence and genuine passion for history. I joined an Ohio regiment portraying Union soldiers at various events throughout the year. For 4 years, I immersed myself in that world. I learned to march in formation, to cook over an open fire, to sleep on hard ground in a canvas tent. I made friends with people 2 and 3 times my age, all of us united by our love of living history. We weren't just playing dress-up, we were keeping memory alive, honoring those who fought and died. Among those friends was a man named Greg. He was probably in his mid-30s, with a weathered face and sharp blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. Greg portrayed a soldier from Virginia, fighting for the Confederate side. He was always trying to recruit me to join his unit for events, arguing that I should experience both perspectives of the conflict. You can't truly understand the conflict if you only see one side, he'd tell me, his Virginia drawl thickening for effect. Besides, we have more fun on the rebel side.
The uniform was different enough from my Union gear that I'd need to start from scratch. Gray wool jacket, butternut trousers, a slouch hat instead of a kepi. I called Greg on a Tuesday evening in late April 2017. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "This better be good," he answered, though his tone was playful. "I'm in," I said simply. "I want to do Confederate reenacting." I could hear the grin in his voice. "Well, it's about damn time. I've got something perfect for your first event, too. We're doing a living history program at Gettysburg in 3 weeks, spending Friday night through Sunday on the actual battlefield. You interested?" My heart hammered in my chest. Gettysburg, the most famous battle of the entire war. I'd read about it, studied the tactics, memorized the names of every regiment involved, but I'd never actually been there. Are you kidding? Absolutely. Good. It'll be intimate, just our small unit, 8 or 9 guys.
We're camping at Spangler Spring, right where the real action happened. Pack your gear and I'll pick you up Friday morning. After I hung up, I had to convince my parents. My mother was especially nervous about me spending the night away from home with adults she barely knew. But I assured her Greg was responsible, that this was a legitimate National Park Service program that I'd call every day. Finally, they agreed. The next 3 weeks dragged by like years. I assembled my Confederate kit piece by piece, broke in my new brogans until they stopped giving me blisters, practiced my southern accent in the mirror. When Friday morning finally arrived, I was packed and waiting on the front porch by 6 a.m., though Greg wasn't due until 7. Greg pulled up in his beat-up Ford pickup truck exactly on time. I threw my Hersack and bedroll in the back and climbed into the passenger seat. The cab smelled like coffee and old canvas. "Ready for your first real battlefield experience?" he asked as we pulled onto the highway. "I've been ready for 3 weeks," he laughed. "Good attitude. Just wait until you stand in where those boys actually fought and died. Changes your perspective." The drive from Ohio to Pennsylvania took about 5 hours. Greg filled the time with stories from previous reenactments, some funny, others more somber. He told me about the time a spectator fainted during a battle demonstration because the cannon fire was too realistic. He described sleeping in a thunderstorm at Antietam and the rain coming down so hard it turned their campsite into a mud pit. But he also talked about the weight of what we were doing. These weren't characters in a movie, he said, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter. They were real people, teenagers, most of them, younger than you. In some cases, they suffered things we can't even imagine. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we stopped for lunch at a diner just outside Gettysburg. The waitress, an older woman with gray hair pulled back in a bun, noticed our period clothing in the truck bed. "Y'all here for the reenactment?" she asked as she poured our coffee. "Living history program," Greg corrected. "Camping on the battlefield itself." Her expression changed, became guarded. "Which part?" "Spangler Spring." She set the coffee pot down harder than necessary. "You be careful out there. That's a heavy place. A lot of boys died there." "We know," Greg said quietly. She looked like she wanted to say more, but another customer called for her attention. As she walked away, I turned to Greg. "What was that about?" He shrugged, but his jaw was tight. "Some locals think the battlefield is haunted. Tourist nonsense, mostly." Though, he trailed off, staring into his coffee. "Though what?" "You'll see." We arrived at Gettysburg National Military Park around 3 in the afternoon. The visitor center was bustling with tourists, families with children running around, elderly couples examining exhibits. But once we drove deeper into the park, following the winding roads to our designated camping area, the crowds thinned. Spangler Spring sat in a low area between Culp's Hill and Crop Creek. Even in the bright afternoon sun, there was something oppressive about the place. The trees grew thick here, their branches creating a canopy that blocked out much of the light. The spring itself bubbled up from the ground, feeding into the creek with a constant gurgling sound. Greg parked, and we began unloading our gear. Within 20 minutes, other members of the unit began arriving. The first was a tall, heavy-set man named Walter, who served as our unit's captain. He had a booming voice and an infectious laugh that immediately put me at ease. "So, you're the recruit Greg's been bragging about," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that nearly crushed my fingers. "Welcome to the Virginia, boys." 2 more men arrived together, brothers named Leonard and Timothy. They were in their 50s, both sporting impressive beards that would have made any Civil War soldier proud. Then came Henry, who was quieter than the others, with an intensity in his dark eyes that made me uncomfortable. Greg had mentioned Henry was a Marine veteran who'd served in Afghanistan in 2008, and something about his bearing confirmed it. As we set up camp, establishing a rough semicircle around where our fire would be, Walter explained the program. "We're here to educate visitors about what soldier life was really like," he said. "Tomorrow and Sunday, tourists will come through, ask questions, we'll demonstrate drilling, cooking, that sort of thing. Tonight's just for us to settle in and get comfortable." Around 5 o'clock, a park ranger stopped by. He was young, probably in his late 20s, with nervous energy that seemed out of place for someone in his profession. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just wanted to check in, make sure you have everything you need." Walter assured him we were fine, but then his expression grew more serious. "I need to mention something. We've had threats lately, people wanting to damage or remove Confederate monuments. It's politically motivated. And while we have security, I'm asking you to be vigilant. If you see anyone suspicious, especially after dark, call us immediately." The mood of the camp shifted. What had been jovial suddenly felt tense. "We can set up a watch rotation," Henry suggested. "Someone awake at all times, armed with a fixed bayonet for authenticity."
The ranger nodded gratefully. "That would be helpful, thank you." After he left, Walter drew straws to determine watch order. I drew second shift, which meant I'd sleep for a few hours, then take over around 2 or 3 in the morning. As the sun began to set, we lit our campfire. The flames cast dancing shadows across the trees, and the temperature dropped rapidly. We passed around a bottle of whiskey that Leonard had smuggled in, along with some historically inaccurate beer. The alcohol warmed my chest and loosened everyone's tongues. Stories flowed freely. Walter told a hilarious tale about a spectator who tried to join a battle reenactment without any prior training, nearly causing a massive pileup. Timothy described his worst camping experience, which involved a bear wandering into camp and stealing their food. We laughed until our sides hurt. But as the night deepened, the stories changed. Henry, who'd been mostly quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Any of you ever experienced something you couldn't explain?" he asked. The fire crackled. No one answered immediately. "I have," Walter finally said. 3 years ago, camping at Antietam. Middle of the night, I heard marching clear as day, thousands of feet hitting the ground in unison. Woke up Leonard, asked if he heard it. He did. We searched everywhere. Nothing, no one. But we both heard it." Leonard nodded. Confirmation. "Never told anyone outside the unit. They'd think we were crazy." "This place is worse," Henry continued, staring into the flames. "Spangler Spring. More men died here per square foot than almost anywhere else in the battle. When the Confederates charged across this ground toward Culp's Hill, they were slaughtered. The spring ran red. Rock Creek there." He gestured toward the darkness beyond our camp. Bodies stacked up so thick you could walk across the water on them. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. The whiskey suddenly tasted sour. "That's enough ghost stories," Greg said, trying to lighten the mood. "You give the kid nightmares." But Henry wasn't done. He turned to me, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "If you see fog coming out of Rock Creek tonight, don't go near it. Don't investigate. Don't try to be a hero. Just stay by the fire." "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because fog doesn't act natural here. It moves wrong. And sometimes," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "sometimes the battlefield remembers." We eventually dispersed to our tents around 11. I crawled into my small pup tent, barely large enough for my body and bedroll. The canvas smelled musty, and every time I shifted position, the fabric rustled loudly. Outside, I could hear the first watchguard, Timothy, moving around the camp perimeter. Despite my exhaustion from the drive and setup, sleep proved difficult. My mind kept replaying Henry's warning: the fog, Rock Creek, the battlefield remembers. What did that even mean? I told myself it was just veteran reenactors trying to spook the new guy, a tradition as old as camping itself. Eventually, I drifted into a restless doze. I dreamed of marching, of drums beating, of men screaming. When a hand grabbed my ankle, I jolted awake with a gasp. "Hey, wake up! Your turn!" It was Henry, crouched at my tent opening. I could barely make out his features in the darkness. "What time is it?" I asked, my mouth dry. 2:30. Get your gear, I'll show you the route. I pulled on my shell jacket and grabbed my rifle, bayonet already fixed to the barrel. The metal was cold against my palm. Outside the tent, the night was absolutely black. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, providing barely any light. Above us, thick clouds obscured whatever moon or stars might have helped. Henry walked me around the camp perimeter, pointing out landmarks I could barely see. "Stay within sight of the fire," he instructed, or at least where the fire was. "Walk the circuit every 15 minutes. If you see anyone, challenge them first. Then come get us if they don't respond appropriately." "What about the fog?" I asked, unable to help myself. He was quiet for a long moment. "If you see it, remember what I said. Don't go near it. I'm serious, kid. This isn't a joke." Then he disappeared into his tent, leaving me alone in the darkness. The first hour passed slowly. I walked the perimeter as instructed, my boots crunching on the grass. Every sound seemed amplified. An owl hooting in the distance, branches creaking in a breeze. I could hear the constant murmur of the spring. My eyes gradually adjusted, and I could make out the shapes of monuments scattered across the battlefield, dark silhouettes against the slightly lighter sky. I checked my watch, 3:15. Halfway through my shift, I returned to the fire and added a few small sticks, coaxing it back to reluctant life. The flames provided minimal warmth, but made me feel less alone. That's when I saw the movement. At first, I thought it was an animal, a deer perhaps, or a raccoon. Something dark shifted near one of the monuments, about 50 yards from camp. I stood up slowly, gripping my rifle, and watched. The shape moved again, but wrong. Too fluid for a deer, too large for a raccoon, and it seemed to be circling the monument, moving in and out of view. I thought about the ranger's warning, vandals, people threatening the monuments. The whiskey still warming my blood made me feel braver than I should have. I was responsible for protecting this camp, for guarding these memorials. I couldn't just watch someone deface history. Quietly, I moved away from the fire, keeping my rifle at port arms. My heart hammered against my ribs. As I got closer to the monument, I could see it was one dedicated to a New York regiment. The shape was definitely human-sized, moving behind the granite structure. "Hey!" I called out, trying to make my voice sound authoritative. "This is private property. Identify yourself."
I advanced more quickly now, almost running. When I reached the monument, I swung around it with my rifle raised, ready to scare off whoever was there. Nothing. No one. I stood there breathing hard, scanning the area. The monument was on a small rise, giving me a decent view of the surrounding battlefield. There was nowhere for someone to hide, no trees close enough to reach in the seconds since I'd seen the figure. They couldn't have just vanished, unless I'd imagined it, unless the darkness and the whiskey and Henry's ghost stories had gotten into my head. I was about to turn back to camp when I noticed something else. The temperature had dropped significantly. My breath formed clouds in front of my face, though it had been mild just minutes before. And there was a smell in the air now, acrid and sharp. It took me a moment to place it. Gunpowder. That's when I saw the fog. It emerged from Rock Creek like a living thing. Not the natural mist you'd expect on a cool night near water, but something thicker, more purposeful. It rolled across the ground in tendrils, white-gray in the darkness, moving against the wind, or rather, moving despite the complete absence of wind. I remembered Henry's warning, "Stay away from the fog."
but I was already far from camp, and the fog was spreading fast. It reached my boots, swirling around my ankles. The temperature continued to drop until my hands ached with cold. The smell of gunpowder intensified until my eyes watered. Then I heard the shots. Sharp cracks in the darkness. Musket fire. Not the muffled pop of blank rounds we used in reenactments, but the real thing. The deadly bark of loaded weapons firing at living targets. The sounds came from all around me, dozens of them overlapping into a continuous roar. Voices shouted commands I couldn't quite make out, men screaming, orders being given. The ground seemed to shake beneath my feet, though I knew that was impossible. The fog rose to my waist now, then my chest. I could barely see 3 feet in front of me. Dark shapes moved through the mist, running past me. Not quite solid, not quite transparent. Human-shaped silhouettes that stumbled and fell, that clutched at wounds I couldn't see. I tried to back away, to return to camp, but I had lost my bearings. The fog had disoriented me completely. Which way was the fire? Where were the tents? I spun around, panic rising in my throat. A figure ran directly at me through the fog. I raised my rifle instinctively, and it passed through me. Passed through me like I wasn't there, or like it wasn't there. And I felt a cold so intense, it burned. My lungs seized. For a moment, I couldn't breathe at all. More shapes now, everywhere. Men fighting, falling, dying. I heard the wet sound of bayonets entering flesh, the screams of the wounded begging for water, for their mothers, for God to make it stop. The fog pressed in on all sides, suffocating, relentless. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't respond properly. The cold had seeped into my bones. Another figure emerged directly in front of me, more solid than the others, a soldier in Confederate gray, his face partially blown away by a musk ball, reaching toward me with hands that were missing fingers. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Then something hit me in the stomach. Not a bullet, or maybe it was a bullet, one fired 154 years ago, still echoing through time. The impact was real enough. It doubled me over, drove the air from my lungs. I fell backward onto the ground, clutching my midsection, certain I was bleeding out, though I couldn't see any wound. The pain was extraordinary. It radiated from my stomach through my entire body, sharp and burning and wrong. I tried to call for help, but could manage a strangled gasp. The fog pressed down on me like a physical weight. The sounds of battle continued, screaming, shooting, dying. I lay there staring up at the fog-obscured sky, convinced I was about to die on the same ground where so many others had died before me. Time stretched and compressed. Minutes felt like hours. The pain in my stomach pulsed with my heartbeat. Eventually, I realized I could no longer hear the battle sounds. The fog had begun to thin slightly, but I still couldn't move. Every attempt to sit up sent fresh waves of agony through my core. I managed to roll onto my side, then to my hands and knees, crawling blindly through the dissipating fog. I must have passed out. The next thing I remember was opening my eyes to find the fog almost completely gone, retreating back toward Rock Creek in those same unnatural tendrils. And I saw our campfire in the distance, a blessed point of light in the darkness. I tried to crawl toward the fire, but the pain prevented me from moving more than a few feet. I lay there on the cold ground, watching the fog pull back like a tide receding. That's when I heard footsteps running toward me. Jesus Christ! It was Greg's voice. Strong hands grabbed me under my arms, dragging me away from where the fog had been. What the hell were you thinking?
He pulled me all the way back to camp and propped me against a tree near the fire. Walter emerged from his tent, then Leonard, then Henry. They all stared at me with a mixture of concern and something else. Recognition, maybe, like they'd seen this before. I had to take a leak, Greg explained to the others. Noticed he was gone, saw a break in the mist and ran for it. Found him lying by the 6th Wisconsin Monument. Did you go into the fog? Henry asked me directly, crouching down to my level. I nodded, unable to speak yet. My teeth were chattering from cold and shock. Damn it. Henry ran a hand through his hair. I told you not to. I specifically told you. What happened? Walter asked, his usual jovial tone completely absent. I tried to explain, but the words came out jumbled. The shadow by the monument, the fog, the sounds of battle, the soldier with half his face missing, being hit, the pain. They listened without interrupting. When I finished, no one spoke for a long moment. Greg threw another log on the fire, and we all watched the flames grow. We've all had experiences here, Walter finally said. Every single one of us. Different details, but the same basic thing. The fog comes out of Rock Creek, and you see what happened here. Feel it. The battlefield shows you what it was like. It's not just here, Henry added. Other battlefields, too. Antietam, Shiloh, Chancellorsville, places where the dying was particularly horrible. Something remains, some echo of all that violence and terror. Most people never experience it, but when you do, he gestured at me, it changes you, makes it real in a way no book or documentary ever could. Why didn't you tell me? I asked Greg, anger cutting through my fear. You knew this could happen. Would you have believed me if I'd told you before? He countered. Would you have come? He was right. Of course I would have thought he was crazy or messing with me. The fog never came closer to our camp. It lingered near Rock Creek, visible in the pre-dawn darkness, but keeping its distance. We sat by the fire, not talking much, just being together. Henry told me about watching a man die in Afghanistan, holding pressure on a wound that was too big to stop bleeding, feeling life slip away under his hands. He said what happened in the fog reminded him of that helplessness, that proximity to death. As the sun finally began to rise, painting the eastern sky with pink and gold, the fog dissipated completely. The pain in my stomach had faded to a dull ache, though when I lifted my shirt, I could see a massive bruise forming, dark purple and tender to the touch. No wound, no blood, but the mark remained. During our free moments, when tourists weren't around, we'd glance toward Rock Creek, toward Spangler Spring, remembering. On Sunday afternoon, as we packed up camp, the park rangers stopped by again. He noticed I was moving stiffly, favoring my stomach. "You all right, son?" he asked. "Took a fall in the dark," I lied. "Just bruised." He looked at me for a long moment, then at the other men, then toward the creek. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That happens here sometimes. You be careful here." The drive home was quieter than the drive there. Greg didn't tell stories. We just drove, each lost in our own thoughts. When he finally dropped me off at my house, he turned to me before I got out of the truck. "You gonna keep reenacting?" he asked. I thought about it. Thought about the terror I'd felt in that fog, the pain, the certainty that I was going to die. Thought about what Henry had said about the battlefield, remembering. "Yeah," I said, "I am." He nodded, satisfied. "Good. Someone needs to remember them. All those boys who died here. Someone needs to keep their memory alive." Years have passed since that night at Spangler Spring. I'm older now, and I've been to many other battlefields, many other reenactments. I never experienced anything like that fog again, though I've heard stories from other reenactors, shared them around campfires, comparing details, trying to understand. I still can't fully explain what happened that night. I don't know if I saw actual ghosts, or if the battlefield somehow imprinted those events so strongly that they replay for certain people under certain conditions. I'm not sure it matters which explanation is correct. What I do know is this: those boys who fought at Gettysburg, who died in agony on that ground, were real. Their suffering was real, and something of them remains at Spangler Spring, in the fog that rises from Rock Creek, in the spring that once ran red with their blood. People visit Gettysburg as tourists, take photos in front of monuments, treated like any other historical site. But it's not. It's a place of tremendous death and pain, where teenagers, my age, when I had that experience, fought and killed each other over issues that seemed worth dying for at the time. The battlefield remembers. It will always remember. And now, so do I. I carry that bruise with me still, not on my skin anymore, but deeper, somewhere in my chest, where I remember what fear truly feels like, where I understand, in a way most people never will, that those monuments aren't just stones. They mark places where real people suffered and died, where blood soaked into soil that doesn't forget. If you ever visit Gettysburg, if you ever find yourself near Spangler Spring as darkness falls, pay attention. Notice if fog starts to rise from Rock Creek, and if it does, if you see those unnatural tendrils reaching across the battlefield, take my advice. Stay away. Some history isn't meant to be experienced firsthand. Some memories are too terrible to relive. The battlefield may show you what happened there, and God help you if it does, because you'll carry that weight for the rest of your life. I know I will.
You survived for now. This was Dark Story Chronicles, home of true terror and whispered horrors. Subscribe and return when the shadows call you again.